Well, good afternoon. This is Mayor Ted Betancourt. I'd like to call the regular school committee meeting to order. Today is April 7th, 2020, and we are starting the meeting at 3:07. Before we begin, I did want to make some statements. I hope everybody is doing well. All of our residents has certainly been a very challenging, difficult time for everybody. And we are working as best we can to try to have some normalcy during this meeting. We felt it was important to discuss a number of issues and wanted to have this meeting. And we hope there's patience with us as we try to work through this. We will be following our regular agenda. We will have a public participation time as well, which I'll speak to in a moment. But really, my thoughts, our whole committee, all of our school administrators, our thoughts and prayers are with everybody during this time. Certainly, like every city and town, Peabody has been hit with a number of positive reports that we think are going to grow. And we're trying as best we can to come together and serve the residents, serve our students and our families as best we can. So we're going to go through our agenda tonight, this afternoon, and work as best we can to continue to move the district forward. Pursuant to Governor Baker's emergency order modifying the state's open meeting law that was issued on March 12, 2020, the meeting today, our April 7th meeting of the Peabody School Committee, will be held using remote participation. We're being broadcast live on PAT, and I believe we have a link to Facebook, and we'll be doing that through remote participation through our Zoom meeting. So why don't we go first call to order? I guess we can start with a moment of silence. Why don't we take that moment now and pray for those that are suffering from the coronavirus and their families, and keep everybody who is suffering and struggling in your thoughts and prayers. Let's take a moment now. All right, thank you. And I do want to have the Pledge of Allegiance, even though we're all scattered. I would like to do the Pledge of Allegiance to honor our country during this time. So if everybody could please stand, and we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance together. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. So let's now go to approval of minutes. We have minutes from our regular school committee meeting on March 10th, 2020. And could you make that motion? I'll turn it over to Beverly.
Motion to receive and approve.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Amico?
Second.
All right, we have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from March 10th, 2020. The motion was made by Mrs. Dunn, seconded by Mr. Amico. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Amico?
Yes.
Mr. Onotis?
Yes.
Mrs. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman? Is he muted?
Are you on me?
Yep, Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mr. Olympio?
Yes.
Mrs. Dunn?
Yes.
Great, thank you. I should have started. We do have all of our committee members here today, as well as our superintendent, Dr. Mark Kerbel, our assistant superintendent, Dr. Chris Lord. We have Carla Chioda, our special ed director, Steve Farrell, our human resources director. Joe Scanlon is our school business manager. And we have Leanna Harris, as usual, taking the minutes of the meeting, and she'll be doing the roll call. Okay, so now we'll go to approval of bills. I'll turn it over to you, Mrs. Carpenter, for approval of bills.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to approve warrant A number 4456 dated today, April 7th, 2020, the amount of $33,486.39, subject to audit.
Great,
Second.
thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. Thank you for the second, Mr. Olympio. So we have a motion for approval of warrant A number 4456. And that motion was made by Mrs. Carpenter, seconded by Mr. Olympio. Could we please have a roll call vote?
Mr. Amico?
Yes.
Mr. Arnott?
Yes.
Mrs. Carpenter?
yes,
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Olympio?
Yes.
Mrs. Dunn?
yes,
that's all. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. I did want to mention, we will be having public participation shortly, and I wanted to direct anyone who wants to speak at public participation to go to our website and click on the link. Once in, they can click raise hand, and that will indicate to me and the co-host, Dr. Chris Lord, that that person wants to speak at public participation. And then I'll recognize that person. All right, let's go to continued business. Mrs. Dunn, anything new to report on the MSBA's project?
the project is still in closeout and it is proceeding according to schedule.
Great, thank you. And now we'll go to the fiscal year 2020 budget update. Anything new to report on our budget?
I would leave this open for Dr. Kerbal or for Mr. Scanlon if they wanted to put anything in about the 2020 budget.
Dr. Kerbal or Mr. Scanlon, anything new to report?
Mayor, this is Mark Kerbal, if you can see me. So I'm going to defer to Joe Scanlon to be able to talk a little bit about the FY20 budget. I know Joe's working extremely hard in the FY21 budget and getting that ready. So Joe, do you want to mention a few things about the FY20 budget, please?
Yeah. Thank you. Over the past couple of weeks, I had been meeting with Mike Gingras and put together a document for him that we haven't shared with you, but we will at your next meeting. It's a two-page memo that I outlined to him with a detailed breakdown of what I see to be an issue with the healthcare budget. He and I are in agreement that the healthcare budget is in a deficit. For round conversation right now, it's over $1 million. And there's 4 different factors that led to it. One was we have hired some people. After the estimate was done, there were, number 2, some assumptions that were made in the budget, and I detail those. Number 3 is that there have been some changes of personnel from single to family plan. And overall, the offsets that were anticipated to be taken this year, we're not going to be able to take them because we're not getting the full school choice amount because we've had some students that have graduated. So that's a broad stroke conversation. I didn't want to open the memo because it's not part of the attachments. So if you want, I could take a look at it either later in the meeting or we could do it, at the next meeting.
Okay, any questions for Dr. Kerbal or Mr. Scanlon? All right, so we'll put that on for the next agenda. I think we'll hold item number 4, the memorial scholarship. And we'll go to number 5, open enrollment. Anything to report, Mrs. Dunn?
Actually, we have a document in our package. It's been the corrected form, which we included suggestions from the committee members at a previous meeting. And that is, I'm trying to find out which page it is in our packet. Sorry.
Page 38.
Thank you. And as you can see, the suggestions were put in there. Our recommended time frame for this will be submission between June 1st and June 19th. I think we'll be able to keep to that timeline, but I would like to say, if rather than approving this today, if we could hold it for another meeting where we may have a better idea of our future calendar, just as far as the workload and, this schedule was actually discussed and decided upon based on based on the way the calendar looked a couple of months ago. So it was designed for the workload at the main office. And I think we will need to look at that in relation to what's going on currently.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Just want to make sure if everybody who's not speaking, if they could have their phone muted so we don't have any of the background noise. Nothing further. We'll go to item number 6. Redistricting. Mr. Hockman, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is kind of something that maybe we should wait till the superintendent report to talk about what we're looking at with contracted services and things like that. My opinion on this is that we should move forward with redistricting. We're mostly all home these days. We can set up a committee, work through Zoom, get documents, share them with each other, and at least start the process of redistricting. But you know, I'm one member of 6 and you're the chair, so I'll defer to everybody else. But I think that we have the ability to get this done, particularly when a lot of people are going through a lot of TV shows and movies, and there's time at least to put this together, I think.
Great. Yeah, no, I do. I've mentioned it a couple of times that I've been very reluctant and hesitant to begin a redistricting review of our school department, our city, but the time has come. And Mr. Hockman, I'd like you to be on the committee, and please, other members that are interested, please let me know. I have a few people that have reached out to me as well that would like to be on the committee, and I think the time is now. Certainly want to loop Josh Vidala, our incoming superintendent, into those discussions as well. But I think we need to move forward with that and begin that discussion and begin that review. So, yeah, why don't we hold that for further discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Huckman. All right, next.
Mr.
We'll go
Mayor?
to public. Oh, Mrs. Dunn, you want to speak?
Yes, I'm sorry. We skipped number 3, the Welch School MSBA update.
Sorry about that. And we do actually, I know we do actually have information on that from the meeting yesterday. So,
We
Mrs. Dunn,
did.
I'm sorry, I did miss that. The Welch School MSBA project update. I'll turn it over to you, Mrs. Dunn, for the report.
Thank you. And it's good news. Yesterday, we had an online meeting with the MSBA OPM selection panel. And at the conclusion of that panel meeting, our selection, the Peabody selection of the Corporation of Dorr and Whittier was approved by MSBA. So we will be working with Dorr and Whittier. They're a firm from Newburyport, very well experienced. They had great presentations for us. They did a wonderful job yesterday with their presentation to the MSBA. And they have a great track record. So the selection board of Dan Doucette, Joe Scanlon, Jim Hafey, Beth McGivern, and Peter McGinn, as well as myself, had a great experience working on this. I think you're all going to be very pleased with the work that Dorr and Whittier will be able to perform for us. And going forward, our next step now will begin design selection. And that will start as soon as we have a couple of meetings. We have a time frame. MSBA has been adjusting their time frames because of current events. And they did ask us what our plans were. And I assured them that we were not letting the pandemic stop us. And we're going to proceed as scheduled, stick to the schedule, and keep pushing forward. So thank you. It was a really great step on the project for the Welch School.
Great. Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. And I wanted to offer my thanks and gratitude to you, Dan Doucette, our purchasing agent, Jim Hafey, our facilities director, and our school administration team, the Welch School team. I did take part in that conference call yesterday with the MSBA, and I was very, it was just very positive to hear the fine comments that were made by the MSBA members about Dorr and Whittier. Their presentation was very impressive. They really had a good handle on our project and what we are looking to do. And I know that has a great deal to do with your work, Dan Doucette's work. And it was just very gratifying to hear the very positive comments that were made about the work that we've done to date. So yeah, we're moving forward with that project, that important project. And yeah, yesterday was a big step. So I was really happy with how everything went. And I wanted to thank you for your continued leadership on this, on moving this project forward, Mrs. Dunn. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so now we'll go to public participation. If there's anyone that would like to speak, that's listening in or watching, they have that opportunity now. And I would
Mr.
open it
Mayor,
up.
there are 2 attendees. They need to click raise hand at the bottom of their screen if they do intend to participate in the event. If they're just there to watch through that attendee link, that's fine, but they do need to say raise hand in order to be accepted. And there's 2 attendees. I'm not going to say who they are until after oh, here we go. We have 1 raised hand. This is Neil. Should I bring Neil into the conversation now, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Okay, now, Neil, you'll need to unmute yourself and then you may speak. Oh, looks like we lost Neil. Perhaps he'll come back on. There's 1 other attendee. And again, if they want to speak, they need to click on the hand at the bottom of their screen. And I'm assuming that that is not the case. So there are no other attendees at this time.
All right, we'll go to Superintendent's Report. Dr. Kerbal, can I turn it over to you, please, for your report?
Unmute. Thank you, Mayor. Hello, everyone. I want to talk about a number of things today. The first, I want to talk about the Student Opportunity Act, but first, I just want to say thank you, Mayor Betancourt, to all of the Peabody school staff and administrators, custodians, cooks, all the volunteers who have helped the last 4 weeks, either opening the schools, teachers, connecting with students every day. The amount of work everyone is doing has just been exceptional. So I really appreciate that. I'm going to talk about food service later on, Mayor Betancourt, so I think I'll wait until later on in my report. But I just wanted to thank everybody so far. You know, this is just very unusual, and everyone's working hard and pulling together. Peabody strong, that's how we do it in Peabody, so I appreciate that. A month ago or so, maybe longer, I presented the Student Opportunity Plan. If people want to refer to that, I'm just going to mention just a couple of things. Let's see if I can find it myself. Here we go. And so some of the things that we talked about was these additions of the following. 11 interventionists that we're getting in terms of our work with Endicott College, a math coordinator, a number of school adjustment counselors, a number of positions in early childhood education, a number of materials, 2 digital learning coaches, some part-time people to help us with common planning time, a criminal justice teacher at the high school, as well as a school and business liaison. The total of that was a little over $1.2 million. And so I had a chance to talk to Josh Vidala, new superintendent, and he and I went over the SOA. He had some questions about the support that we're giving to the high school, especially the fact that the NEAS report has come out and it's going to be made public, you know, in a couple of weeks. And so the high school will need support in terms of helping its, you know, its strive to its accreditation. And so I think we have grant money for that. And Chris Lloyd can talk about that a little later on. So I think in terms of supporting the high school, I think we're covered. And so what I'd like the school committee to do is ask questions. If they have any comments, eventually I need a vote by the school committee so that I can submit my plan of action, okay, to the state and sometime early in May.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kerbal. Mr. Amico, I see your hand raised. The floor is yours. You can unmute your button.
Okay, I did. If we're actually going to get into discussion on the Student Opportunity Act, if I can share my screen, I can put up a PowerPoint that lists the entire detail. I don't know if you want to do that now.
Let's hold that for now, Mr. Scanlon. I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Amico.
Thank you. Through the chair to Dr. Kerbal. Thank you very much. I did have some questions on the Student Opportunity Act, and one of them actually was the fact that it seemed like a lot of the supports were in place for elementary, and I'm certainly in favor of a lot of those supports. There were a couple of items that I'd like to see revised into a different role. For about 4 years now, I've really been pushing for a second assistant superintendent down in central office. I think this is going to be an absolute vital position, especially in the terms and in the conditions and the times that we are in now. I can certainly envision come September and probably for the next 2 years, the amount of meetings that central office is going to have with the DESE and other state organizations. And to think that a superintendent and one assistant superintendent would be able to handle that would be far-fetched. I think right now we are deficient in the number of people that we have at central office compared to other like districts. I could probably name about 6 or 7 that have at least 2 assistant superintendents, if not more. So, and I can make this in form of a motion, whether it's through the SOA or later on, but I certainly would like to see the early childhood coordinator position put on hold for now. That's $95,000. And also to take one of those digital learning teachers, you have it budgeted for $134,000, approximately $62,000 each. I would envision taking one of those positions, adding it to the 95, and as soon as we can get a position out for an assistant superintendent's position to start July 1st. I just think that we've needed this before this pandemic, and it's going to be a severe need for this district to have that second person. And then obviously to work with the incoming superintendent, Dr. Vidala, to see what the role of that assistant superintendent would be. I would envision it would be something along the lines as if we're working on curriculum, since those 2 positions that I outlined are curriculum positions. I would imagine that that position could be a curriculum type position. If anyone wants to comment on that, please do so.
Thank you, Mr. Amico. Open that up to any other school committee members that would like to speak on that topic. All right, we'll go Dr. Kerbal.
I had my hand up.
Oh, I didn't see it on the, is that Mrs. Carpenter?
I just had my physical hand up.
Oh, you had the physical. All right. Yeah, Ms. Carpenter, I'll turn it over to you. I am looking at the panelist board.
Okay.
Hands up, so I'm sorry that I missed you.
Wait, let me see if I can do that before I. Is that what you see?
Yep, now I see it. So
Okay, I'll
Mr.
do that
Carpenter, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Through the chair to Dr. Kerbal, in regards to Mr. Amico's comments about some of the reducing some of the other positions, could you just tell me the major responsibilities of the early childhood ed coordinator, what their primary role would be, so that I can take it under advisement as to whether or not that would be a position that I'd be comfortable eliminating?
Sure. You want me to answer that, Mayor Bettencourt?
Yes, please, Dr. Kerbal.
Okay. So if you think about, we have a number of preschool programs in the district. Preschool program at the McCarthy School, and then we have programs at the South School. And so I think that we have, in coming into kindergarten, we don't have a unified program. And only that, we don't have unified assessments either. And so I think that there's several things going on here in play. I think the early childhood program, and I consider early childhood pre-K, K, and 1. So I think that if you're going to close the achievement gap in any school district, it has to be coming out of kindergarten and first grade. And I really think that our assessments and the transitions from pre-K to K are very vital. And right now, we don't have somebody that oversees that thread and could work with not only our preschools that are on site, but preschool programs that are outside of the public schools. And so the same thing with kindergarten. So we have 5 schools, I'm sorry, we have 8 kindergarten programs. Okay, and I think that an early childhood person could coordinate that effort so that the transition from pre-K to K to 1 in terms of curriculum instruction and assessment is unified. Now, I agree with Joe Amico. I do, 100%. I think the city of 10 schools, 6,000 students needs a second assistant superintendent. I agree to that, but I don't necessarily agree that it should come out of the SOA. The SOA has a list of 17 evidence-based strategies, and I'm not quite sure where the assistant superintendent would fit in. Whereas the early childhood coordinator does fit in the preschool programs, and one of the, I think it's highlighted in bold in terms of an evidence-based program that's supported by the state. So I agree with Joe Amico. I just think it should come out of the regular budget. And I think the early childhood program coordinator for pre-K to K, pre-K to 2, I think definitely would help our students in early education.
Thank you, Dr. Kerbel. Mr. Miko, I see your hand raised.
Thank you. Through the chair, Dr. Kerbel. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I guess my concern is that we haven't had an early childhood coordinator, I believe, for a year or two. So that's why I'm leaning towards the assistant superintendent role. I do think with some really good game planning, we could probably find a whether it be an additional grant or we turn that role into a stipend role. I have major reservations of securing $95,000 for that position. And I agree with you. The catch up from K to 2 is probably the most vital in an education, but with having a person possibly stipend in that role and an assistant superintendent in charge of curriculum, now you can have a person in charge of curriculum vertically all the way from, excuse me, kindergarten all the way to high school. With all those built-in supports that you've put in, the 11 interventionists, I see us doing great things with that. But to set aside $95,000 for that one position that we haven't had, excuse me, in place for about 2 years, I believe, and then taking part of the digital learning aspect and adding that, I think we could get a lot of bang for our buck, especially in this climate that we're in right now.
Thank you, Mr. Amico. Mrs. Carpenter?
So I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. When we talk about, and I'm not sure, this might go to Mr. Amico, when you talk about not having an early childhood educator for the last couple of years, are you referencing Deb Murphy's kindergarten coordinator position? Okay.
I am, through the chair to Ms. Carpenter, I am, and I believe that this position is basically been brought to us as a replacement for that position.
Yeah, and I think if I remember correctly, most of that was grant funded as well, her position. I mean, I'm very much interested in the early childhood education coordinator. I do think it's very important. I do agree about, Mr. Amico's suggestion about the additional assistant superintendent. I am concerned about where it does fit into the SOA because I did read some of the parameters and I'm concerned about how that would be explained given the guidelines of what it has to be. One suggestion I'd like to offer is possibly in regards to kind of like what Joe was saying, a stipend, or we do currently have some preschool directors who might be able to take on more responsibility with an increase in pay and then not use the whole 95. But those are just some of my thoughts at this moment. It is something I want to think about a little bit more and hear from some of the other members. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. Mr. Arnottis?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to touch base on this and agree. I agree with Mrs. Carpenter. I've been supportive in the past of this idea, Mr. Amico, of adding an additional assistant superintendent. I do think that's something we need to look at long term. My fear as well is whether this necessarily fits in with the Student Opportunity Act. That's my only concern about this more than anything else, because we're going to have to continuously come back year after year and make that argument when an additional assistant superintendent rather would be a full-time permanent position that we will most likely want to keep forever, as far as I would be concerned. So I think that's something we really need to keep in mind as we have that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arnottis. Any other thoughts or comments at this time?
Yes.
Mr. Hockman?
I think Ms. Dunn has been holding her hand up physically, so I'll yield to her, and then if you can get me.
Oh, sorry, again, Mrs. Dunn, I have the panelist screen on. I'm not seeing everybody, so I didn't see your hand raised.
It's okay. For some reason, I don't have that feature of the electronic, raising your hand, so.
Okay, well, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. I can appreciate what Mr. Amico is saying, but I will be honest, I believe that we need to have that discussion in regards to our full budget, because I think that the assistant superintendent position is such an important one that it deserves its own line in the budget, even though I know everything in the Student Opportunity Act would also be in the budget, but it is much more necessary than just being related to the Student Opportunity Act. And it's something we have talked about in the past. It's something we've known we need to do for a long time. And structurally, I think we need to look at that in a different conversation. I will say that I've been very pleased with the items that were brought forward under this proposed Student Opportunity Act disbursement. I do not want to see the loss of the pre-K to 2 coordinator. As far as I know, our kindergarten coordinator retired in December. And I don't recall any position that we lost 2 years ago as far as pre-K and kindergarten. But I do know that when our former kindergarten coordinator was moving on and retiring, that we were really concerned about our kindergarten and pre-K program. And I look at this proposal as a really vital piece with regards to student opportunity, because it's going to provide some equity amongst all those programs, coordinate all those programs. I don't think a stipend cuts it, to be perfectly honest, because whoever has to deal with preschool not only has to deal with what we provide through the Peabody Public Schools, there is a lot of coordination that goes along with all of the private preschools in this city. And that's huge in itself. Furthermore, our kindergartens all have NIAC accreditation. I know that's a great big undertaking. I know we're very lucky, very fortunate to have that distinction Other communities don't have that. I don't know the timeline, but I have a feeling we're coming up on a renewal for those accreditations. And I know that if we are going to do that, you need to have someone who can handle all of that paperwork, the coordination, the investigation. It's a very, very lengthy process. It's very worthwhile. We were lucky we always had the kindergarten coordinator to do that. I don't want to see that position taken out of the Student Opportunity Act proposal. To me, this proposal right now is very well integrated because it's providing things at every level. It's working towards that vertical articulation that is so important that we have been lacking in many instances, and we finally have the chance to do that. And everything in this is going to be able to be related to data to show student achievement. And that's one of the pieces that we have to do when we use this money. I am perfectly fine with the proposal as put forward, but I did have one other suggestion. We had a student come forward the night we did the public presentation for this Student Opportunity Act, and he requested purchasing a vape alarm for the high school as a trial. Those vape alarms come in under $1,000. If possible, I would like to see if we could carve out $1,000. It fits within the requirements of the Student Opportunity Act as far as safety and facility improvement for the safety of the students. And to be honest, I'd like to be able to do that so that the students can see that they always have a voice when they come forward and speak to us. It was a very well thought out presentation. It is something that the students on the parent-teacher student organization have been working towards all year long. And for under $1,000, I think it would be something that we could put in there and be able to get some data from that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Mr. Hockman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to everyone that spoke on this already. I agree. Well, before I agree on anything, let me just ask through the chair to Dr. Kerbel, you have two digital learning teachers in this proposal at $134,000 collectively. What function would they perform, and why do we need them at the elementary level?
Well, if you recall the presentation that was made by the 21st Century Learning Team, how they talked about working with staff. I'll give you it's happening right now. So we have online, we have Choose Your Own Journey. And so we have the digital learning coaches that are running seminars for teachers right now. Right before I came in here, I was listening to one of them talk about ill-structured problems and well-structured problems to a couple of teachers, and how remotely what works is ill-structured problems rather than well-structured problems. And it was fascinating how a high school teacher and a kindergarten teacher were looking at the same thing. So my point is that I think they're valuable. As we're moving forward, I mean, if we're going to move Peabody forward, especially in the 21st century, we need to be able to have these kind of people working with our staff. And we have 8, so we have, you have 8 schools. And right now we don't have any. We have one person that's in the middle school right now.
No, and through you, Mr. Mayor, to Dr. Kerbel, again, thank you for that answer. And I don't disagree with that these people are necessary. And we were one of the first districts, if not the first district on the North Shore, to have one-to-one devices for grades 6 through 12. And I think that's an important piece too, in terms of moving the district forward and staying, ahead of the game in public education. And later on in this meeting, we're going to have a conversation about what education looks like for the balance of this year. And while I think that these positions are important, if we're not able to utilize those positions in times like these, why do we have them? Why do we have the one-on-one devices for kids 6 to 12? is I know Ms. Chioda's, we're going to talk about equity in a special education sense in a little while. And we're going to talk about equity in terms of devices and internet access in a little while. So, I really kind of threw it out. I appreciate your response to it. It was more of an opportunity to give me a platform to start on that. So I appreciate that. There are a couple of positions that I do genuinely have some concerns with in your proposal. And that's the 0.4 physical education teacher at the middle school and the 0.4 foreign language teacher at the middle school. Are we seeing that there are kids being turned away from classes because we don't have the 0.4 in each of those positions? I see
No,
Dr. Lord waving too. I don't know, whoever, through the mayor to whomever.
I can answer that. This is Chris. I don't know if you can see my hand. Got a couple of things I can clarify with respect to the conversation so far. The digital coaches, we are working behind the scenes now to meet the contract obligations that were agreed to with the union a few weeks ago. And
The what? The what?
there's a contract obligation that, as I understand, I could be wrong.
No. From what I understand, we ratify contracts. I haven't seen any.
That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
A few. I can talk about it later. But the digital coaches are part of that solution. And I guess it was approved a while ago. The other piece. Go ahead, Mr. Amico.
No. Hold on. Dr. Lord, are you finished?
Yep.
Let me,
All right.
I'm not hearing anybody.
Mr. Hockman, you can't hear us?
I cannot. I can hear you.
All right. You still have the floor.
I hear you, Mr. Mayor. So okay, I'll keep the floor. If maybe we could
It
just
looks like
focus on the. Am I still here, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, it's still you. Go ahead.
Okay, so maybe if we can just get away from the digital learning coaches for a second and talk about the physical education and the foreign language teachers.
I can address that.
Thank you.
Dr. Kerbal, I'll turn that over to you.
Thank you. So, I'm one of the evidence, and I'm going to read it. It says, increase staffing to expand student access to the arts, athletics, and enrichment, and strategic scheduling to enable common planning time for teachers. And so one of the reasons why the 0.4 PE and the 0.4 foreign language teachers is at the Higgins is because of those opportunities. The principal is able to schedule teachers so that they can work together and plan together. So that helps him, that helps the teachers get together. So it does two things. It hits both evidence, expands student access to the arts and enrichment, and also allows teachers to come together for common planning time during the week.
Thank you. I kind of expected that that's where your response was going to be. I mean, that's the evidence or the criteria that you list next to this slide or the purpose of this portion of the proposal. It's my understanding that Dr. Lord, through his efforts and efforts of a lot of other administrators and with cooperation from the various bargaining units, achieved common planning time by restructuring the schedule at the high school. So without any financial or budgetary impact. So I don't necessarily see that the common planning element to what you're suggesting, Dr. Lord, is necessary, or these positions are necessary for that. Secondly, if we're going to expand or increase student access to arts and enrichment, I really don't want to see a physical education teacher or 0.4 physical education teacher. I don't think it's necessary with the dwindling enrollment at the Higgins. And every budget season, it seems like we struggle with foreign language. And every budget season seems like we're contracting a foreign language, or because there's not enough enrollment in foreign languages for us to justify keeping foreign language teachers. So, and I'm trying to, look at the SOA proposal in its entirety. While I agree with Mr. Amico, and it sounds like Dr. Kerbal, that we do need another assistant superintendent. And I also agree that we need a kindergarten coordinator. And I'm just trying to find, you know, whether the assistant superintendent position falls under the SOA criteria, to me isn't horribly relevant, because I think we can shift some of our other budgetary expenses into SOA money and then use that money that we're saving in our traditional budget for an assistant superintendent. So I'm not in favor of the physical education teacher or the foreign language teacher at this point. I think that the salary listed with, I'm assuming that's with benefits for the early childhood coordinator, is inflated. We had a fantastic early childhood and kindergarten coordinator for a long time. She did retire in December, and we struggled with not funding that position. And I think we did so with the expectation that we'd get it back at some point. So I'm happy to see it back, but I think $95,000 might be slightly inflated. And then the last question I have in terms of the proposal, and then I'll yield to my colleagues, is you have a school and business liaison at $15,265. If you can simply explain to me what that is, I just don't know.
Sure. May I respond? Can you see me?
I don't think the mayor can see anybody. I think he's.
Okay, I'll respond. So just a couple of things. Can you hear me? Okay, so.
Yeah, Dr. Kerr.
All right. The 0.4, the 0.4 foreign language and the 0.4 PE. Okay, that is for the Higgins Middle School, not for the high school.
Correct.
And so I got a note, I just got a text message from the principal. He says, in order to keep our current schedule with planning time, I need slightly more staffing. Enrollment numbers are going up. And that he had mentioned about not wanting to eliminate foreign language last year. So that takes care of that response to that piece. You had mentioned about the early childhood coordinator. That number is actually, if I were to pay it outright, brand new, okay, it's probably under, it's under what it is, because if you look at the Unit B contract, okay, it's probably, it could be higher than that, all right? We're coming in at 95,000. I think that's a reasonable number. I don't think you can find somebody for a lower amount. I suppose if it was a 10-month position, possibly. Let's see. Jared, Mr. Hartman, there was one more thing that you had mentioned.
Yeah. So if I can just get on the early childhood kindergarten coordinator, I don't recall that being a Unit B position. I thought that was part of the administration. I don't recall that being a union position, first of all. I don't think that Murphy.
If it's a Unit B position, it's a Unit B, it's administration.
I don't think it's a Unit B position. I think it was part of the superintendent's administration. I mean,
okay.
Right. I mean, Ms. Chioda and Mr. Farrell and Mr. Lord or Dr. Lord, pardon me, are administrators, but they're not in the Unit B contract. So, and I don't think Ms. Murphy, who did a fabulous job for us over a long period of time, I don't recall her salary being at $95,000 or close to it, even at the end of her time here.
It was before it was cut.
Okay. And the other question I had for you was the school and business liaison.
Okay.
What that is.
So that's actually a good question.
Finally.
It's actually a good question. So one of the things, my experience has been in terms of developing school business relationships, you really need somebody from inside the district that develops the relationship, okay, with the outside community. I think $15,000 is just seed money to get started, okay? And whether that position is added on to someone else's position, it's a good start, okay, to start developing this pathway from school to career, okay? And so I think $15,000 gives you somebody that works, you know, whether it's several hours a day or 1 or 2 days per week. And that I've seen it very successfully implemented when I was in Marlborough. because I think the potential of developing business relationships in Peabody is just phenomenal. Okay, and so knowing the history, I think we had this relationship at one time. So this is just a little seed money and could be added to another position to make it more of a healthy position. Okay.
All right, thank you, Dr. Kerbal. Thank you, Mr. Hockman. Mr. Amico?
Thank you, through the chair. So yes, on this whole SOA, I'm just thinking things have changed over the last 2.5 to 3 weeks since this was brought forward. There seems to be, some support for some items, not so much support for some items, and we've only heard from 2 or 3 school committee members. What I'd like to see with this SOA right now is since that PowerPoint presentation, the school committee is also in contract negotiations with a new hire superintendent. What I'd like to see, and I think you're going to hear this from me a few times today, I just don't think it's fair for a superintendent to start on July 1 and that superintendent not have a say on decisions that are being made, by an interim superintendent or anyone else for that matter. I just think, and I'll make it in a form of a motion, I do think Dr. Kerbal and someone from central office needs to communicate with Dr. Vidala, who hopefully will be under contract soon or sign a contract for July 1, to make decisions for July 1. Because any decisions that we make now, and Dr. Kerbal can agree on one thing and maybe Dr. Vidala may not agree on something. And I just think in order to be fair, not only to the new superintendent coming in, but also to the district and the people who might be in place in these new potential positions, is that we get communication from Dr. Kerbal to Dr. Vidala and us in between, and then come to an agreement so we can come back and maybe vote on the SOA. I just think the way we've looked at it so far, there's so much disagreement within just 2 or 3 positions that I just don't think we can move forward at this time. So in the form of a motion, I'd like to make a motion that Dr. Kerbal, if this is legal, I don't even know whether or not it is, maybe I can get some legal advice from one of our lawyers on the school committee, to be in communication with, as soon as Dr. Vidala signs his contract, to be in communication and to go over this SOA and other big ticket items that may come across us. Because on July 1, a superintendent will be in place, and I would like for that superintendent to be in agreement with what is being put forward by our interim and our school committee. I'd like to get some thought from other members. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Amico. I see Mr. Olympio has his hand up. Mr. Olympio?
Put me in, Coach. Yeah, just a couple of thoughts. I agree in spirit with what Mr. Amico is saying, but I don't know. Yeah, I would think we would have to get, Josh under contract first. And if the contract says he's supposed to start July 1st, then, when does this SOA have to be submitted to? So I don't want to get tripped up on a legal issue there with, soliciting his input, and could that lead us into some trouble down the road? And also too, getting back to the presentation, this is probably to Dr. Kerbal, the criminal justice teacher. Where is that, at the high school?
Yes, it's at the high school. And John, can I just mention
Yeah.
one thing? Just so everybody knows, I reviewed the SOA with the incoming superintendent. Okay. So I did that, and he and I will have transition meetings. So we had an hour meeting last week. We have an hour meeting tomorrow. So we schedule an hour meeting from here to the rest of the school year. The point is, my role is to help him be successful. Okay. We review contracts, which I'll review with everybody during the executive session. So Just so you have that information, the criminal justice teacher
Okay,
at the high school.
Okay, and how many do we have? How many criminal justice teachers do we have at the high school right now?
I believe we don't have any.
I can answer
Okay.
that. The CTE criminal justice program was approved about maybe a month or so ago, and this is the position
Okay.
that would support that.
Okay, okay,
It's the
Okay.
6th CTE
And-
position at the high school.
okay. So that actually makes me feel a little better that you have been in communication with Josh. So he's aware of this SOA, what's in it, and he's given you his feedback on it.
Yes, he has.
Dr. Okay. All right, thank you.
I don't know if anyone can see Beverly has her hand up.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Olympio. I'll turn it over to you, Mrs. Dunn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, John. I just want to say that if we're going to start putting things on hold that we have been working for, that are designed to move this district forward, we're making a significant and terrible mistake. These things have been before us for a while. I don't think anything other than a pandemic has changed our educational initiative other than showing us that there is even more that we need to do going forward. We knew we were going to hire a new superintendent who will begin in July. And we have an obligation to move this district forward and have it ready for him to come in. If we stop right now approving things and holding things, especially now that we know Dr. Kerbal has been meeting with and reviewing things with the incoming superintendent, which I appreciate that very much. I think that's wonderful you're doing that. If we stop now, then why in God's name are we even going to continue to meet as a school committee? We have work to do. This district needs to go forward, and you cannot hold off on this work. We've sat through some wonderful presentations that show us how quickly and how well we can move forward. And I am not going to vote to support anything that's going to hold us back. We have been held back for far too many years. We're moving ahead leaps and bounds, and these proposals are designed to move us forward, and the Student Opportunity Act funds have been handled in accordance with the law. You can't use it it all had to be designed to meet the requirements, and it has been designed to meet those requirements. It is on a deadline. I know timelines are being moved forward. I agree with that. But as far as I'm concerned, nothing should be holding us back right now.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Mr. Amico?
Thank you through the chair. And I agree, nothing should be holding us back. But if, as a school committee member, as someone who has the confidence of teachers, educators, and residents in this city, I think I have the right to disagree with what's before us. And if I have the right to disagree with what's before us, then I'm going to say it. So whether someone thinks that we're holding back because I disagree with something that is put forward, I would disagree with that. If I disagree with something, I'm going to speak up. I'm sorry I'm sorry not everyone agrees with me, and that is fine, respectfully. But to say I'm keeping someone back, or we're keeping the city of Peabody holding them back because I disagree with something, I think we could use a better choice of words. And I believe we do have an executive session later on this afternoon. I'll address it at that point. Thank you.
All right, thank you,
Chairman,
Mr. Amico.
if I may,
Mrs.
I
Dunn,
am-
yes?
I will never disagree with someone's right to disagree or to have a different opinion on the school committee. That's a very important right and responsibility, and everyone knows that I support that. The reason that I spoke out and disagree is because I don't want to see us being held back, and I see two different tracks here. a difference between a disagreement and stopping progress.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. So my understanding, Dr. Kerbal, if you could weigh in, this has to be submitted to the, to DESI by what time? Early May, you said?
Mark, you're muted. Dr. Kerbal, you're muted.
Yes, I think I don't have the date out in my, I think it's might be May 4th or May 6th. But it's early part of May.
Okay,
You can
so
see Andrew Arnottis has his hand up.
yes, thank you. So Dr. Kerbal, before May, that date, you need to have a vote from the school committee in order to submit that to the state, correct?
Correct. There's a short form. They call it the short form, but there's a form that I have to submit. And
Okay,
that, so, which it's not too detailed, but I have to do is I have to identify, much like I did on my slide, actually, very similar to what's on the slides. I have to
Great. No,
provide the
thank you.
evidence and the information.
Now, I know you and your team put a lot of work into this. Thank you. So I think we're going to have this, another meeting on this because we're going to have a final vote. I don't think we're going to have a final vote today, certainly based on this discussion. I think probably pretty close as to what, and I'm happy to hear Dr. Vidal and exchanging ideas and that's wonderful. And I know you guys probably in tomorrow's meeting discuss that as SOA. So thinking that we need to put this on further discussion next meeting, which I have some ideas about when we should meet again. And then that'll give us time to have Dr. Kerbal speak with Dr. Vidal and kind of discuss his ideas as well. But I've been really pleased with the different ideas that have been presented on this. I just think we need to take a little bit more time and have a future meeting to make the vote so that we can get it to the state on time. Mr. Arnottis, did you have your hand raised?
Yes, just very quickly to provide some clarification. The new date is May 15th or later as determined by the commissioner. So we have a good amount of time on this.
Oh, good.
You know, there's some great things in here and I think there's things that are worth discussing, but just so you know, it's not as if it's something that we need to have done tomorrow. I think we have time to, keep the work going and continuing these conversations and doing what needs to be done. But the earliest now is May 15th, and that may get pushed back even later depending on the commissioner. So there's plenty of time.
All right, excellent. So thank you for that. So yeah, I would like to put this on for a future meeting. This is an important vote, important decision. I think we're probably very close. I think we're in agreement on the vast majority of the SOA. And I think just with some discussion, we'd be able to come to an agreement, get some weigh in from Dr. Vidal, and then have a discussion and work that out. So I think we're very close on this. Is everybody okay with moving forward in that way, keeping this on the agenda the next meeting?
I don't know if you can see Jared Hockman has his hand up.
All right, Mr. Hockman, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, just quickly. First of all, I'm in agreement with what you just said, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Arnottis, and I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but under the current climate, if you're able to answer, are these funds in jeopardy?
I have not been told either way. As you may have heard, the budget is in flux right now. There's a lot of those conversations going on. There was actually going to be a hearing with the chair of Ways and Means today that got delayed due to some difficulty technically going on up there to broadcast it. So I think we'll be hearing more about how the budget looks in the next few weeks and months to come. I don't have any major news on that right now.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Hockman and Mr. Arnottis. So we will hold that item to the next school committee meeting, and that'll come up for further discussion, which I think is warranted. Dr. Kerbal, I'll turn it back to you, the continuation of your report. Dr. Kerbal, if you can unmute.
Yeah, okay. The next part of the report really has to do with the remote learning recommendations put forth by the Department of Education. And I sent that to you. It's in the packet. And I actually have sent it out to parents and families. And so I didn't know if the committee wanted to make any comments about, any comments at all about the guidelines and recommendations from the Department of Ed.
Great, thank you, Dr. Kerbal. Any comments or questions, thoughts on this, any of the members? Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to say that I think it's very heartwarming to see how the district has pulled together and what the teachers and the students and families are doing right now. It's really amazing to see how people have been able to change the way of teaching and learning. It's very, very different for everyone. And I'm glad that we have the commissioner supporting education with a very, very good eye towards common sense.
Great, thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Mr. Amico, you'd like to weigh in on this?
Yes, through the chair, I just, I also want to thank the teachers, the educators, the whole staff, everyone on Team Peabody that has really, really stepped up their game. You know, this is a very difficult situation. I can't imagine what a lot of our school children are going through. And to have a lot of what I'm seeing from teachers on an enrichment basis. I know my own children are getting a lot of enrichment, and that's really just awesome to see. And I'm not surprised by that. I would caution the next 2 weeks, especially. As a teacher for almost 20 years myself, distance learning, remote learning, online learning will never, ever, ever replace what a great teacher does in a classroom, ever. No one will ever sell me on that. And I actually got one of my master's degrees online. I had kids who were 2 and 3 at the time hanging all over me, and I was writing papers. Yeah, that's great. That's a great platform to have online learning, but no one's ever going to replace a real teacher as far as I'm concerned. So I do have some cautions out there, and I do have some suggestions for teachers. The next 2 weeks, for everything that we've heard from the medical experts, are going to be very, very difficult. I'm going to ask that teachers try to ramp down as much as they can on the academic piece and really push the enrichment piece, because these kids really need support. Teachers right now are supporters. I think every other time they're heroes, but let's face it, the nurses, the doctors, the checkout clerks at Star Market and wherever, Shaw's and Stop and Shop, those are the real heroes right now. The police officers, the firefighters, teachers right now, educators, we are best served right now as supporters, the ultimate supporters. Be there for your kids, be there for your school children. Principals, same thing. Everyone on Team Peabody, we should be focusing on support over the next 2 weeks. I can't stress it enough. Yeah, academia is what we do. It's what we get paid for. But I've said this before, if things aren't right with a kid, social, emotionally, they're not learning. I don't care how great your lessons are. I don't care what you put in front of them. You could be the best teacher in the world, but if you're stressing academics over enrichment at this time, and especially over the next 2 weeks where it's going to get really tough around here, I'm just cautioning everyone from central office to principals to teachers to really just take care of the kids. The academics will come. We'll have time. We'll have time a year from now, 2 years from now. We'll make it up. Our kids are resilient. We have the best teachers around, and we have awesome principals and leaders. So let's focus on the well-being of everyone in the city, teachers, parents. There's a lot of loss out there, financial, health. But I want to thank everyone for really pitching in. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Amico. Very well stated. Any other comments at this time? Mr. Hockman?
Sorry, I didn't unmute myself before I started speaking. Might be an omen. Anyway, I started by saying I agree with Ms. Dunn and Mr. Amico and Dr. Kerbal in regard to the tremendous amount of work that our teachers and administrators and staff members and principals and special education directors and special education department have put into what's gone on so far in terms of efforts to have enrichment for our children and give them opportunities while we're at a school. I think we're does this Friday mark 4 weeks, I think, that we're going to be at a school?
Yes.
And while I don't disagree with Mr. Amico in the sense of always being concerned about the mental well-being of all of our students, as well as all of our staff members, all of whom are under a tremendous amount of stress, that a type of stress that we haven't seen before. I do wonder what education looks like for the balance of this school year and beyond. And Mr. Amico may be accurate that it's, catch up later down the road. But without knowing what that plan is in place for Peabody, it's really difficult to offer an opinion as to whether or not we should be starting with instruction at this point. So I guess I'll go through the mayor to Ms. Chioda, and I asked for her to be here, and I'm happy to see you, and I hope you're doing well. We as a district committed to one-to-one devices for grades 6 through 12 several years ago. So we're in a different position than a lot of districts in Massachusetts, in that we know our kids, at least grades 6 through 12, have devices, and some of the kids in 5th grade, I think the Brown and the Welch, I believe, also have devices, and then there were some supplemental devices spread out around the district at some grab and goes earlier in this crisis. So the equity piece for grades 6 through 12 in terms of devices doesn't exist, right? The equity piece for grades 6 through 12 for internet access shouldn't exist, because I think Comcast is committed to providing free Wi-Fi, at least for 60 days while this crisis is going on. So there remains an equity issue in regard to special education and compliance with IEPs and 504s and the law. So are you able to speak on where you and your department are on that?
Sure. So through Mayor Betancourt, through the chair. Yes, the high school began remote instruction about a week and a half ago, Dr. Lord. And as soon as we were notified that remote instruction began, we began working with the special educators to ramp up our efforts to make sure that there was equity provided. I know that the IT department has been working tirelessly to identify additional devices. They put out another 160, I think, in the last few weeks to make sure that students had access to devices, and we're looking at additional devices. Dr. Kerbal and Chris Mitchell have worked to identify additional devices to make sure that our students have that access piece. We've started from a special education perspective to identify the supports and resources, because we've been providing a significant amount of support and resources for individuals both with and without disabilities. And over the last week, we've been working very hard to make sure that we're getting information out to families about the increased services that are available. Now, that being said, we've been keeping very close watch on our social emotional temperature of our students, because we are aware that if our students aren't supported in their social emotional levels, that they're not able to access curriculum. We know that when school is in session, and we know that's even more true now. We have to be aware that students may require opportunities to meet with their counselors that they meet with on a regular basis. So our counselors have stepped up and are meeting with students. They started checking in the first week we were out. So I have nothing but wonderful things to say about our counselors. Our related service providers are tirelessly looking at how they can improve services to their students to make sure that our students don't fall further behind, and are able to continue to access their special education supports. Is it the same as being in session? Absolutely not. And this is a very anxiety-provoking time for everybody. It's an unprecedented time. But I have to say that the special education teachers in Peabody, with the support of the principals and the general education staff, because they're working very closely through the enrichment process, have been absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, and Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yes, please.
Through you to Ms. Chiodo, I agree with that. I mean, I think that your department has really done a tremendous job in supporting students. I see it myself. I speak to a lot of people in your department on a fairly regular basis, and I'm thankful and grateful for the work that they've done to this point. And as well, echo that to the teachers and the regular education teachers as well, because I think that there are a lot of regular education teachers out there who are providing supports, not just enrichment pieces, but reaching out, asking how students and families are doing and how they're feeling, and providing platforms for at the elementary level, especially for classes to get together and socialize, in this remote type setting, which is important and extremely encouraging for the, seeing the extent of the use of technology by our staff. And I'll step back a little bit. I think we're hearing maybe my frustration a little bit, and part of it is because I'm not an educator like Mr. Amico, and I give him a lot of deference and respect for what he does on a day-to-day basis. And I don't know. I haven't been in front of a classroom ever in my life for more than a session or two as a guest, speaker or something like that. So I don't know what it's like to be a teacher, and I don't pretend to know what it's like to be a teacher. I do see that other districts, or maybe it's private schools who are moving forward with remote learning. Essex Tech is moving forward with remote learning. And knowing what we've invested, and this kind of led into my question about digital learning coaches earlier, knowing what we've invested in this district. When I got on the school board, I think there was one person in the IT department and no digital learning coaches. And I haven't been here that long. I've been here a while, but not that long. And now I think we have 5 or 6 people in the IT department, and one-to-one devices, which we didn't have. And so I don't want to put more strain or pressure on people. And I don't know whether starting or restarting with a normal or traditional school day in a remote type setting is more or less stress. I don't know. I mean, I think that some structure is needed. I keep hearing and reading about kids going out to play, and they're out at the basketball courts, and they're out in the parks, and the mayor and the police and Parks and Recreation Department did a great job shutting those places down, because we don't want people outside. We want them inside. We want them, so if we want them inside and we don't want them binge watching TV, which seems to be a lot of what's going on too, what do we do? I mean, is giving a traditional school schedule, and I'm talking 6 to 12. I really don't have much expectation K to 5. I mean, I think that's a different group and a different dynamic. But 6 to 12, where kids are going out kind of on their own and doing stuff because they're not otherwise occupied. Can we do more? Should we do more? And I'm not saying this as a criticism to anybody, and please don't take it that way. I'm really speaking as kind of a parent, a little bit as a school committee member, and just someone that, I don't know what we should be doing. I see Dr. Kerbal wishes to respond. So, Mr. Mayor, that's what I have.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Huckman. Yeah, we'll go to you, Dr. Kerbal, and then I wanted to bring Mr. Olympio in after.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. So passions run deep. And I agree with Mr. Amico, and I respect everybody on the board. Okay. For me, you can't do anything unless you feel safe, unless you're fed, and you feel healthy, and you're not scared. You're not scared that your parents are going to pass away, your grandparents are going to pass away. So there's a lot out there right now, and I'm in a unique position because I'm hearing it from everyone. And so one of the things about being remote is that you have tremendous amount of contact between email, between the phone, okay, in all these chat lines, and then talking to so many different people, that Joe is right. They have to feel safe, they have to feel healthy, they have to be fed. And so the mental health is so important prior to any type of learning. So given that, there is a tipping point, okay, Mr. Hartman, you're hitting that tipping point. There is a tipping point in which we do too much or we do too little. And we're trying to balance. That's the same with all the communities around us. A lot of communities have said, stay with enrichment. Our own principals have said, let's stay with enrichment. In terms of the one-to-one devices, you know, we're not hearing much about the middle school because they're in clusters, pretty organized, pretty structured, and people have access to one-on-one. They're used to it. So they have done mostly remote learning in the past, so it's an easy transition for them. Not so at the elementary. I will say it's amazing. Our teachers are putting out videos for kids. Happy birthday videos, I love you videos, lip sync videos, anything to keep connected. I think that's key. Learning will follow. But the most important thing I want to bring up, and I know I'm dominating some time, is the equity piece. It's rearing its ugly head. It was there when we were in buildings, okay? And now that we're at home, you know that I asked 2 principals today, have you contacted all your kids? And the answer was, we've been working at it and working at it, and we still have 8 to go. And 8 kids. We've been in school, it's our 4th week, and they're still trying to connect with families at home because they don't have access. They don't answer their phone. They're working. Okay, some of them have moved, and we don't even know it. Okay, so I would say, and I've asked the high school, the middle school, and the elementary to put together learning plans, okay, that are concrete enough, that follow the guidelines of the state, and also that parents can follow online. They can look at it, so it's spelled out, and they're working on it now. And so I would say that a lot of our kids are at a disadvantage, whether they have special needs, okay, or whether their mothers, fathers are working, okay, whether students have to work also, they have to take care of their 7-year-old and this 2-year-old. So there's a lot going on, and I think it goes back to Mr. Amico. I'm agreeing with him a 4th time. I think that we have to really make sure that we're taking care of everybody, and then learning will follow. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kerbel. Mr. Olympio, wanted to have you weigh in.
Yes, no, I just, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to, offer my, firsthand experience, and I think the teachers are really doing a wonderful job. They're doing everything that they can. I've been very impressed with the communication, the structure. This is K through 5. And also, too, and it's really tough, too, with special education that, for instance, with my son, I have to tip my hat to his teachers. They are doing everything they can. They're in communication with my wife. They're really putting in a great effort, and I can't thank them enough. But at the end of the day, it is extremely hard for kids, and especially in special education, they need that. Unfortunately, they really do need, to be in school and have that structure. And my heart breaks for kids that, may not necessarily have a parent that can certainly, help in that regard. So I think, when eventually we do come back, I think there is going to be some additional patience that's going to be needed with a whole cluster of kids, because we might all be home, but there are a lot of students that their parents are police officers, nurses, doctors, essential workers for cities and states. And unfortunately, a lot of these kids are still left unattended, and that might speak to, what we see on the streets, if we see them, playing basketball or riding their bikes, because they're really in a no-win situation. But I am extremely impressed with the way the K through 5 teachers have been handling this, especially the special education teachers. Certainly parents have reached out to me and conveyed that message as well. So I just just want to thank everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Olympio. Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There, in line with this conversation about, the online learning, I think there's one thing that I don't know how many people are aware of this, but I believe that today there was a presentation for our teachers on teaching children who've suffered trauma. And one of the things that everyone here needs to realize, whether they can understand that or not, everyone has suffered a trauma. Nothing is normal right now. And that's very difficult for many people to deal with. It changes the way that our children have to be taught. We have had, we have programs in our district where children who have already suffered traumas are taught with specific strategies. I don't know what those are, but I know that right now our staff is trying to learn how to teach every child based upon the trauma that they are suffering right now. Everyone deals with things differently. We're all parents. We know our own kids deal with things. They process things differently. And one of the things that I think everyone needs to realize is our children have suffered trauma. Adults have suffered trauma. Our teachers have all suffered trauma. So as Mr. Amico said, we need to care for the people and the learning will come. And I believe that that's been at the heart of all of the memos that I've been reading from Dr. Kerbal and Dr. Lord that have gone out to staff, and I'm sure it's reiterated in the meetings they're having with people. But what we're doing now, we can't recreate the normal school day. You can try, but this is not normal. And it's a difficult thing to realize and a difficult thing to deal with because everyone wants everything to go back to normal. There isn't going to be anything normal about what we're going through. So trying to keep things as steady as possible is good, but expecting everyone to do what they normally do and react the way they normally would react, and even for children to learn the way they normally would, there's an underlying stream of difficulty for everyone. And if you can think of it, if you notice it with your own children and yourself, staying focused is very difficult right now. Being able to process things normally is very difficult. Some of the routine things that you do on a good day can be the most important things that you can do right now. Serving someone's favorite food, keeping meal times the same, bedtime the same, keeping to your daily routines can be a struggle right now for a lot of people. And I do think that people, teachers and students included, are learning lessons that no one ever anticipated, but there is a lot of learning going on. The enrichment activities are teaching our children. They're going to be okay. But we also have to recognize that we can't do everything we planned right now.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Mr. Hockman?
Yeah, thank you. I'm not dismissing or minimizing that the world has changed. What I'm saying is it's a lot easier to understand what quote unquote the learning will come means if we have an understanding, as if we have a plan or if we have an idea. I mean, does that mean that, the learning won't come for our seniors, right? They're going to presumably graduate, and whatever they're missing in their last month of instruction, unless it's happening with Dr. Lord and his plan in place, they're not going to catch up on this learning. A second or third or fourth grader, I'm confident we can have them catch up with their learning, whether it's over the course of 2 or 3 or 4 years, by shifting the curriculum slightly, barring the state taking any real significant action in terms of what education looks like. We can shift the curriculum and they'll pick up, concepts along the way. My concern is that an 8th grade algebra student can't get into 9th grade geometry without completing algebra. So while it's nice to say that the learning will come, if that means that the state, and I'm just throwing stuff out there because I don't know that any of us know what's going to happen, but if we're shut down beyond May 4th, which I think is, my opinion, is pretty real, are we just sitting still until September? Is the state going to call students back and teachers back in August? So we can pick up some of this curriculum that we're missing. I mean, I understand the emotional side of it, Ms. Dunn and Mr. Amico. I understand that very well. But I also understand that we're human beings that need to move forward, and we need to have some idea as to where we're going. And to just sit idly, which is what it seems like the plan is extremely frustrating for myself as a committee member and for a lot of parents. Dr. Kerbal, you're not unique in getting all these perspectives from parents in the school district and constituents. We're all getting them. And, some parents are overwhelmed. Some families are overwhelmed. There are families that don't have any parents at home, and there are other siblings that need to be cared for. I get all that. And I don't know the answer. I don't know that it's what Dr. Lord has put forward in the sense of having a school day going forward is normal, or if it's taped lessons that are put on a platform that kids can access at a certain time and maybe respond to the questions or to the assignment within a week period, a 10-day period, a 2-week period. I'm not looking to add stress to anybody. We're already stressed a lot. Although this isn't the first time we've experienced this, right? I mean, we didn't shut down education after 9/11, right? The country shut down for a couple of days. And I get that this is different because of the fear of the virus and the resulting aspects of that. But we've shut down as a country before, and we've shut down education before for short periods of time and gotten right back to it with grief counselors, with supports, with people in place who can support our children and our students and our families. And maybe I'm getting this wrong. And maybe I'm, 3-4 weeks ago, I brought this up and it was too soon then, but I don't know when it's not too soon. I just don't know what education looks like for the balance of either the 2019-2020 school year or the 2020-2021 school year when it starts. And people are asking that. And I don't know how to answer that. I don't know that anybody here knows how to answer that, but that's part of my frustration when I hear the learning will come.
Thank you, Mr. Hockman. Mrs. Carpenter?
Thank you. I just, I want to say that at this time, it's very confusing for so many of us, and you don't really know the right and the wrong things to do. Something that's very important that I think for all of our students is some type of structure, is something, every day to do. I know that right now we're supposed to be just maintaining what they've already learned and building upon that. Not a lot of new educational material at this time. It's hard, and it's going to be hard. And as many of my committee members have already said, we don't know what's going to happen. And there is a little bit of just wait and see where we're supposed to go with all of this. Will we return in May? Will we have another month of school? Will we not? So much of that is up in the air. And a couple of points I want to make is thank you to so many people that are still out there working. The food that's been provided, the custodial staff that's still showing up, all of our administrators. There's been so many people working so hard, and I am not going to critique any of you because everything you're doing and anything you're doing is great. I will say that, one thing that you hear a lot or see a lot of people talking about are the milestones. When we talk about mental health, those milestones that some of our kids are missing out on. And I know as one committee member that I just want to say this publicly, that I will do whatever I can to make sure that our seniors, and I think you're all going to agree with me, no matter what month it is, get their graduation, get their proms, the moving on ceremonies. I think we're all going to be able to still do it. And I want those kids to know that we're still going to do it, because yeah, we're talking about education, but we're also talking about parts of your life that you always remember. And I don't care if it's August, they can march on the field and get their diplomas. But I just, we're going to get through this. And I just want to thank everybody that's been there and is helping. And it's going to be okay. And a little bit every day, or else my kids would stay in bed all day long if I didn't tell them there was a Zoom class coming up. Wake up. A little bit of something, it has to happen. They have to have some type of schedule. But I just want to thank everybody out there. And I know it's tough, and we'll get through it. So thanks.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. Everybody spoke extremely well. This is a very trying time. No easy answers, and I think there's merit on all of this. And it is difficult to know what to do, and we all want to do the right thing, and certainly challenging. And I know everybody's dealing with this: parents, educators, community leaders, business leaders. It's been a difficult time. So we got to keep pushing and keep working together, and that's the only way we're gonna be able to move forward is together. So any other comments on this topic? I know we have on new business, I think kind of a similar topic, what we've been discussing, educational objectives for the remainder of the school year. So we might be able to take up more of that at that time, but I wanted to go back to the superintendent's report. We also have the number of items to cover. So Dr. Kerbal, I'll turn it back over to you. Are you muted again?
Yeah, there we go.
All right.
Yep, thank you. I appreciate everyone's comments. You can see how, you're all compassionate and very passionate. And I do want to say, so that all of our teachers and our leaders, I agree with Brandy, are working exceptionally hard. Okay, and they do what they can for kids. Listen to teachers talk in a conference. There was about 30 staff members in a chat, and the preparation that they're doing on weekends, at nights, people are, even our principals, but a lot of we have a lot of young staff, and they have 2 or 3 kids, and they're juggling our family. So, well, we'll pick this up later on. There was on the agenda is payment for contractual services. So I know Joe Scanlon, you might want to weigh in to be able to talk about who we are paying. And right now, we are paying for staff. But I'd like to see Joe talk a little bit about our vendors, so that we're clear.
Mm-hmm.
Joe, can you talk a little bit about vendor contracts?
Sure. The memo is a summary of what the commissioner's notice that was put out like 10 days ago. And it covered 4 areas. I'll just summarize them. The first one he cited was the non-residential school placements, which are the tuition out school choice charter schools. Even if the students are not attending those schools and other district students are not attending our schools, those payments and charges are part of the foundation budget formula. So they're automatically being taken out. So it's just a courtesy that he put it in the memo to tell you you have no say in that one whatsoever. The second one is the special ed tuition placements, which are, to our students that are attending specialized school. We did very shortly into the stop down, Carla, I called all of the schools to find out what their status is, and not surprisingly, all the schools, I think except one, were closed. So our outlook was we stopped making payments to these schools. So that's the point that he addresses, the commissioner addresses in general. The philosophy is that the commissioner is recommending that all payments go out, similar to how, payments are being made for businesses for the most part. In municipal settings, we do with our staff that aren't directly involved with students, per se, custodians, secretaries. That's the philosophy. So that's the special ed student placements. And the third one is the contract services, which is similar vein. Those are the service providers that come into the schools that aid in working with the students. Obviously, that's not taking place, but the commitment to these services is what was the intent here. And then the last one was the outsourced services, that what he addressed was the bulk contracts like busing and cafeteria. So since this memo has come out, there's been a couple other follow-ups to it. And, Carla, if you want to talk about some of the special ed placements, a lot of the services are being provided remotely. So I'm not sure if you want to add anything on that, or that's just really what the change has been in the last 10 days.
Yeah, through the chair, if I can, I would like to say that we have been in communication with our out-of-district placements and with several of our contracted vendors, and remote services are being provided. All but one of our out-of-district schools have put together thorough remote learning plans. The other school is in the process of developing that remote learning plan, but has been providing remote supports to students. Many of our vendors that provide services within the district provide supports to families for some of our students that require maybe a higher level of intervention, and those behavioral and social emotional supports are absolutely getting out to families, because as we know, this is a very stressful time, and those supports are as important now, if not more important than they were when we were in session.
Okay, getting back to the fourth one, the outsourced services, the biggest outlier there is the buses and, the special ed transportation. There's really no service that can be provided remotely by the vendors. But those are such large contracts that the commissioner's position is that there should be some form of agreement between the contractors and the district where some form of payment has gone out to go out. None of it has, and this is a day-to-day conversation. The Department of Ed, if you know the name Jay Sullivan, is Associate Commissioner of Finance. We're having these Zoom talks every 3 days to talk about the different transportation contracts. The sense is that if the districts, municipalities come into agreement on a percentage of the contract price, it would be more aimed at covering the overall costs, capital costs, rent, lease payments. I'm sure you have a million questions. Those are the types of questions that we cover in these conference calls. So nothing has changed. We're trying to narrow it down. We're in a group. We have Healy Bus. We're one of the smallest contractors. There's only 4 districts that use Healy. So I'm working with Matt Cruz, who's the business manager in Revere, and then the business managers at KIPP Academy and Lynn and Pioneer Charter School. So we've been in contact with Healy. We're not getting any sort of commitment. I defer everything to Mike Gingrich. Whenever I get off the phone, whenever we have notes from these meetings, I just shoot him an email. We've had conversations. Dan Doucette's been very helpful also in that, we have issues in our contract. We have legal terms in our contract that we cannot pay for services that are not provided. And that's what Mass General Law says also. So the commissioner's notice provides clarity, but it's still a lot of issues need to be worked out on that. So that's kind of the summary in the memo, and then I'll open it up to questions. We're only looking to pay vital services. We're paying utilities. And obviously, if we buy something and we take delivery of it, that would end up being on a warrant. But you really, you haven't seen that many warrants. We just ran a couple through the city pay. I'm assuming that we're really going to focus on putting warrants together in the next couple of weeks, whether or not what we present to you. So I'll wrap up there, Mr. Chair, if you want to have questions.
Great, thank you, Mr. Scanlon. Mr. Amico, you have a question or comment?
Yes, through the chair to our business manager, Mr. Scanlon. So I just had a quick question about the contracted services. Thank you for that outline. That was great. So if we are not paying these contracted companies, are we able to carry over any of these monies into next year? And if so, how much can we? And does that affect our funding for next year, or can we place it in other places within special ed? Thank you.
Sure. The way I would answer that, and like many business managers, I tend to have my cold days. I walked into, and I told Mark the first day of the shutout, I said, this is really horrible, but it looks like a good chance for us to balance our budget. We're going to end up spending less money paying contract services. Whatever, even if we agree to pay 80%, that's an awful lot of money that's still going to be left off. So your point is, Joe, that we're going to have funds available in the budget. I would caution that it's a budget. There's two sides to a budget. There's revenue and there's expense. And whether or not the city is still able to collect the revenue that's anticipated to balance and to cover the budget, we could end up the year, pick a number, $500,000 to the good, but the city could be down $2 million in revenue. So, we kind of have to wait to see how that goes. At minimum, I'm kind of hoping that, the $1 million concern we have with healthcare, that's just going to it's going to go away because we're going to have other shortages in other areas. But to your point, if there is valid funds left over at the end of the year, yes, there's Mass General Law section that allows us to pre-buy 3 months of special ed tuition, which could help us next year. Anything else is fairly strict terms. If you want to spend money by June 30th, you have to spend it. You have to take delivery of it. With rare exception, if you're going to do, if Jim Hafey's going to do contract work in July, sometimes the auditors let that kind of stuff go.
Thank you, Mr. Scanlon. Any other questions, Mr. Hockman?
Yeah. Here I am. So I do see that the commissioner in his memo that you gave us a summary of talks about being able to negotiate some of these contracts or require different services for what we're paying for. When it comes, I'll leave the special education piece alone. I think Ms. Chioda has a good handle on that, and you do too, Mr. Scanlon, and I'm confident that we're going to work through that properly. Healy Bus Company is a little bit different, and I think part of the commissioner's objective with this memorandum was to keep some people off of unemployment, even with the stimulus that came through, and that's why we're being directed to pay our employees and pay for contracted services. It's my understanding Healy laid off all their bus drivers, so I don't think that they're paying salaries. So with that, I would expect that if we're going to pay Healy, and I don't have a problem, following the directive of the commissioner, that it certainly is X minus salaries and employment expenses, probably minus gasoline and other maintenance, that they're not going to have to perform as a result of not using their buses, unless, and I give you a big unless, and I kind of was hoping that this would be a different agenda item, but I don't know where to squirrel it in, so I'll take it here. We've talked as a district about the need, or let me take that back, my desire to digitize our special education files. We still have a tremendous amount of special education files sitting in the Kiley, a building that hasn't been occupied in years. So there shouldn't be any coronavirus issues with those files since they haven't been touched by any human beings, presumably in a long, long time. What I'd like to see is, and whether it's through our own transportation department and our own buses and drivers, or through Healy, and I haven't spoke to Ms. Chioda about this, and I apologize for springing it on you with this public meeting, but I'd like to see those files digitized. We have clerks, whether there's in special education department or school building assistants, secretaries for each school building, that I'm not sure if they have any responsibilities or functions now. And I'd like to see us get them a scanner and a hard drive and get these files to them by the buses, leave them on the porch or on the curb where there's no human to human contact, get the files inside, scan and digitize them. And by the time we're up and running, we may have all these files scanned and digitized by our own staff. And it was, I think, an expected cost of about $250,000 the last time we looked at this. So if that's something that can be negotiated, again, whether that's through Dr. Kerbal and our transportation department directly, or Mr. Scanlon through Healy, and Ms. Chioda, you'll need, at some point, and again, I apologize for just throwing this at you here, chime in as to whether or not this thought has any reality attached to it, or if you have other things planned for people in your department. I don't know, but just a thought out there while we're talking about contracted services.
If I could just respond to comments. One, getting back to the questions about the breakdown of the transportation cost, that is exactly what we're doing. 300 plus business managers, we're breaking out into groups, by transport suppliers. And I did work on this in a prior life, and I've given Jay Sullivan some breakdown. We've gotten into the weeds, as a lot of the business manager call it, about how school bus contracts are priced. So we'll go through all that. He may not be paying salary, but he's paying unemployment. So that's the type of trade-offs that occur. The second is, in the memo, there's a reference to the Education Stabilization Fund, which is just an allusion that the commissioner made. There's kind of another term that's starting to show up, the CARE Fund. I think where we're heading, if for those of you who've been with the school, committee for a while, if you remember the ERA funding that came out in 2008, that all the districts are going to get some sort of funding. This is my take on it based on what I'm hearing. And then we'll end up charging against that fund. So that goes back to the point about it's not going to be going into the general fund. It's going to be going into the ERA fund. So there's a whole lot more to learn about that. So I just wanted to add those two comments. If anybody else has any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Olympio?
Yes, I just wanted to, through the mayor, to Mr. Scanlon, I just want to add that I was actually talking to an owner of a bus company just a couple of days ago, and what I think that our district and other districts might be seeing is a lot of these bus companies are going to apply for the PPP loan, where the federal government will cover the first up to $10,000 of wages. So she told me that she gets this loan and she keeps her employees on the payroll, and I would expect us to get some bills from these bus companies. So that's just something to think about. And it's kind of a double-edged sword with this person. She said, gee, I applied for this loan and I'm going to get these funds, and my drivers are all upset that I didn't lay them off because they would make more money staying home between the federal and state unemployment. So it'll be interesting to see if there'll be an issue with getting bus drivers back to work. So that could be an issue to look at down the road. But I would expect some districts to receive bills from these companies if they get these loans.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely a work in progress, and I just reassure you, every piece of information, new information I gather, it's a beeline, across to Mike and to Dan Doucette, keeping social distance. and get their intake on things. So not going to move forward until I'm in complete sync with the city hall.
Yep. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Dr. Kerbal, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. I'd like to talk a little bit about special education department reorganization. So I'm going to ask Carla to talk about it, and there's going to be some changes, but they're cost neutral. So let me turn this over to Carla.
Hi, so over the course of the last several months, one of the many things that I've been doing is taking a look at how the program is, how our special education programs are running, and taking a look at particularly our team chair responsibilities and the supports that they're providing to programs, to buildings, to parents and families. We've had some real inequities and some challenges in the caseload for our team chairs. I'm sure you've had discussion in the past regarding the high caseload numbers that our team chairs are carrying. There have been adjustments to team chair roles and responsibilities that have reduced their ability to provide supports directly to programs and to buildings to improve instructional services to students. I'd like to propose that we make an adjustment to that. It is a cost neutral. There will be no change to the costs associated. But if we are able to eliminate the preschool director's position and the special education coordinator at the high school position and put in 9 team chairs, we're better able to split the caseload requirements and serve all of our students. Our timelines are suffering because of high caseload numbers with the current configuration. In addition, I'm recommending that we consider adding a special education assistant administrator to be able to act as my designee, to be able to support special education team chairs, to provide evaluations for special education team chairs on a contributing basis, and also to be able to directly evaluate related service providers who provide services in multiple buildings. So the overall configuration, currently we have 7 special education team chairs, 1 high school special education coordinator, 1 preschool special education coordinator, who and both also carry caseload for team services. And with the change in configuration, issues like I currently have a team chair who has over 200 students on her caseload. A review with several districts across the state through my director's listserv indicates that typical caseloads are between 120 and 150. So we really have to try and alleviate some of those caseload coverages so that the team chairs can really provide some of the specialized services that they're capable of providing some coaching within the classroom, and staying better connected with both the timelines and parent needs.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Chioda. Mr. Amico?
Thank you, through the chair to Ms. Chioda. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. I just had a quick question. Did you say that it was the costs of doing this would be equal, completely equal? There'd be no additions whatsoever in terms of the budget?
Yeah, so last year through the grant, there were additional funds set aside for an additional team chair. We weren't able to identify a team chair that had the qualifications that we need to perform the role. So with the incorporation of those funds that are already earmarked and identified, we would be able to, and the elimination of the high school coordinator and the preschool coordinator positions, would be able to more equitably distribute that, add the special education assistant director position, and not increase any staffing costs other than that position that was already identified.
I just have one. Thank you, Ms. Chioda. I just have one other thing on this, and I appreciate you putting this together. I believe we did have a meeting. It might have been was a finance meeting, and initially we had talked about doing an audit of the bus situation and transportation. And I remember Mr. Scanlon went ahead and did that, did a great job on that. And then one of the things that we had talked about was an audit in special ed. And this sort of seems like this is coming out of this. I alluded to this before, and not to take anything off of you, Ms. Kyoto. I think you're a phenomenal special ed specialist director. What I would ask is, again, and I mentioned this earlier, in case of moving us forward, where this is such a big decision to make all these changes within our special ed department, because it does look like a big decision. I would ask again, if somehow, some way, we can involve our superintendent, who will be coming in on July 1. And my reasonings behind this is, when we were interviewing candidates, one of the true things that really stood out for me was his expertise in special education. A bachelor's degree in elementary and human development, a master's degree in moderate special needs, a dissertation on collaboration between general ed teachers and special ed teachers, which is such an important role in education today. And I just think having his expertise out there, knowing that he's going to start on July 1, I'd love to get his feedback on that as well, because with your expertise and his expertise, putting that together, I just think that we can't lose on this. So I'm just asking what everyone else thinks about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Amico. Mrs. Chio, did you want to jump in? Please do.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I would like I'd love to be able to discuss the recommendations and the reasonings behind the recommendations with the new superintendent. I would caution that if we are going to move in that direction, one of the reasons that we had difficulty filling the position of the team chair last year is because we waited late into the hiring process to be able to post that position. Those positions really need to be posted soon if we're looking at bringing in somebody that has the qualifications to meet those needs, because they fill quickly and your better candidates are employed by July 1st. So I'd love the opportunity to have those discussions with the incoming superintendent as soon as possible to incorporate those discussions.
Thank you. Mr. Amico, did you want to respond?
Yes, and thank you, Ms. Kyoto. I appreciate that. And again, I just look at this as a situation of you're hiring a head coach, and that head coach was an assistant head coach, and he was he was a specialist, a defensive specialist. That head coach, now that you're hiring, would want to probably bring that successful approach that he had on another team. So that's why I'm just bringing this. And again, this is nothing to take from you, Ms. Kyoto. I think, as I've stated, you're a tremendous asset to our district, and I just think with Dr. Vidala's input and your input, I think the sky's the limit on this. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Go back to you, Dr. Kerbal. Or how does the school committee want to hold this till the next meeting, so we have a little additional time to take this in, put this on for our next meeting? Mrs. Dunn?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'll be honest, even aside from the issues which Mr. Amico brought forward, which are very good ones, we just got the documents a couple of hours ago. So I would feel more comfortable if we did have time to look at it and absorb it, and then to be able to discuss it with, I know I will have more questions the more time I have to take a look at this. So I'm not opposed to putting it on to the next meeting, as long as we're having a meeting in the very near future. Thank you.
Yes, I anticipate recommending that we have a meeting very shortly. So let's hold this item. I think this is important and merits some further discussion. So we'll put that on for the next meeting. Dr. Kerbal, turn it back to you for your report. Can you mute again?
There we go. I said, so I'm meeting with Dr. Vidala tomorrow. We have an hour set up, so certainly the SOA can be part of that. This conversation, the reorganization, also, if not this Wednesday, then the following Wednesday.
Okay.
The next thing is the revised draft. So we're taking a look at the 2021 budget. I'm sorry, calendar. And I think the union had a chance to review this as well. So this is the second review. If you have any questions, want to take a look at the calendar?
Thank you, Dr. Kerbal. I'll open that up for any comments. Mrs. Carpenter?
Thank you. Through the chair to Dr. Kerbal. I know last time I did ask you if the union had a chance to review. You were going to double check on that. You just commented that they did.
Yes.
Was there any concerns? Was there any changes that were asked? Anything come out of that conversation?
No, not to my knowledge, not to me.
Okay. And when you say it was reviewed with, it was Mary Henry and you had a conversation with her about it?
Sure. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Amico?
Yes, through the chair to Dr. Kerbal, thank you for bringing this to us. I did notice that September 14th is the second Patriots Day on the calendar, and that was something that I think we were waiting for. And maybe Mr. Arnottis can give us some an update on that, because I believe that second Monday in September is going to be Marathon Monday, and that would probably be a no school day. And I see that on the draft there, and I thank you for putting it on there, because that's where I think the state's going. But through the chair to maybe Mr. Arnottis, could you just give us clarification on that? And if that's the case, then I would be okay with approving the calendar. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arnottis.
Yes, I believe that is correct. Yes.
Okay. Mr. Hockman?
Yes, briefly, thank you for putting this forward, Dr. Kerbal. In the recent few years, we've had the first day of Rosh Hashanah off. I know that the first day of Rosh Hashanah is Friday night and into a Saturday this year. Is that the only reasoning that we're not seeing that in the calendar?
I believe that's so.
All right, it wasn't pushback from anyone that you're aware of?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Hockman. Any additional comments or questions? All right,
Okay.
do we need to take any action, or is this, do we hold this, or what's the recommendation?
We need to vote.
Let's vote.
Okay,
Like to make a motion to follow the recommendation of the superintendent on the calendar.
Second.
okay, you've heard the motion by Mrs. Dunn, seconded by Mr. Hockman. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Amico?
Yes.
Mr. Arnottis?
Yes.
Mrs. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Hockman?
Yes.
Mr. Olympio?
Yes.
Mrs. Dunn?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We'll go back to Dr. Kerbal.
Okay, thank you. The marathon continues. Food service updates. So I believe that the school committee has been updated as much as possible regarding food service, but let me just give it in a nutshell. So for 4 weeks, we've had, over the last several weeks, we've had food distribution to those families on free reduced lunch at the Higgins, at the middle school, and at the Welch School. Thank you for all the cooks, volunteers, and for everyone else who's helped. I think I've said that repeatedly. And the amount of conversation behind the logistics around food service is really immense and intense. And so therefore, the latest is, oh, excuse me, one second. Thank you. So with the apex of the coronavirus coming up in the next week or two, the volunteers that we've had, our cooks and all the people that are involved in the food service are feeling a little bit unnerved by this, okay? And so we said, all right, in terms of the people that usually help out, we know we're not gonna do anything until after school vacation. And so we've been working with Haven for Hunger, especially Corey Jackson. Corey and I have been texting each other all day, even during the meeting, trying to get an update. So if the state allows or gives approval for Haven for Hunger to be, for lack of a better term, a satellite site for us, okay, then we were able to provide food for Haven for Hunger, but the Haven for Hunger would have to prepare it and then distribute it to all of our families. So this is what's going on between Maureen Rose, our Director of Food Service, and Corey and the state. It's like a triangle here, and there's other people involved. So we're just trying to get approval from the state for Haven for Hunger to be a site. And once that happens, then we can do the logistics in terms of ordering food for 2,000 families, okay, to be distributed out of Haven for Hunger. The numbers are going up from week to week in terms of the distribution at our schools. So we hit 750 families yesterday. So this is an ongoing situation, trying to solve it because I know how important it is to get food to families, okay? And I'm just waiting for some information. Hopefully I get it before the end of this meeting. And if not, then tomorrow. And I know there's a follow-up meeting coming up either, I believe tomorrow at City Hall. So that's the update as far as I know it. If anybody who has anything to add, please do.
Great. Well, thank you, Dr. Kerbal. Yeah, this has been a vitally important work that we've been doing, and this has really been a team effort. Your team, our food service staff, so many volunteers, Corey Jackson with Citizens In, Jared with the No Child Goes Hungry program. And this is something we have to continue in some way. This has to be continued. And we do, I know we have a meeting Thursday morning at 9 a.m. on this topic to try to come up with something that works and sustains this program. I think you reported that there were 700 families that received food yesterday. That was up from 500 last Monday. So the need is there, and I know all of us want this to continue. And I understand that a lot of the volunteers, a lot of our employees are having great anxiety over this. And we completely understand that. So we got to try to put our heads together and make this work for all of us. So let's open that up. Any comments, thoughts, questions from the committee members? I'll start with you, Mr. Hockman, then go to Mr. Amico.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Dr. Kerbal. First of all, thanks to all the food service people that have helped provide food to our students. I've talked to them, many of them, when I go in on Mondays and see them, and they're eager to do the work and they're happy to help the kids, and they know better than any of us the needs that exist from those students. I also do understand the directives coming from the CDC and from the president, and from the governor, and from our own mayor about the spike that we're anticipating in the next 10 days. And, there's nothing you can say about, people, talk about students that have anxiety, people who are at work and having anxiety isn't fair to anybody. And it's certainly understandable if we're going to sit this one out for a week or two and reevaluate. That being said, I want, while we're on live, the reasoning for getting the Haven from Hunger as a satellite site is so that the products that the school can order for food, if the Haven is approved as a site, get delivered to the Haven. We go through our normal process of ordering and payment, and we get reimbursed by the federal government for that. That's how that all works, and that's why that's an important piece here. And hopefully that does come through. We've, in addition to the food that's been prepared and provided by the school service staff, my organization, with the collaboration of the Haven and a whole bunch of volunteers. I mean, you want to talk about the city of Peabody coming out and really shining. Every time I've asked for volunteers to provide food to our students, I get volunteers coming out of the woodwork, and God bless them. Everyone's anxious and scared. I just want to, at least publicly thank them for doing that, as well as the food service people and the transportation people and everybody else. And I do know that we have a meeting coming up, but I don't want to preempt that. I can tell you that at least as far as today is concerned, Tuesday, what are we, April 7th or March 72nd or whatever we're at, we at No Child Goes Hungry do plan on providing the regular bags of food to students on Fridays. We hope, in collaboration with the health department in the city and the mayor and the schools, I know that the mayor has issued a very, very, very clear directive and stern directive that no one is to enter any school buildings, and I can't disagree with that. However, there is a way to provide at least the food to these students outside of the schools or outside of a school. I just wanted to say I hope that we're going to continue with some sort of food delivery or food grab and go mechanism this coming Monday and Mondays moving forward, even if it might look a little bit different in terms of who's preparing the meals and who's preparing the bags and who's handing them off to people as they drive up and come get the food. If we were to stop this completely, it would overburden an already overburdened Haven from Hunger that is working round the clock to get food and to prepare meals and to force or to, bad choice of words, to redirect students and their families down to the Haven would be a burden that I'm not sure that they can bear. So I'm glad that we're meeting on Thursday to talk about this a little bit further, but at least as far as today's concerned, I'd like the public to be reassured that it's my hope and expectation that we're going to continue with some sort of food deliveries on Mondays, or food grab and go, I should say.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hockman. Dr. Kerbal, please
Yeah.
jump in.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. So I did a lot of what ifs with the Maureen Rhodes, our Director of Food Service. And one of the questions I asked is, what if we wanted to serve next Monday? Could we do it? Okay, and then, but her answer was that the cooks would not be available. So, but to go to Jared's point, okay, so somebody other than food service would have to prepare, and I'm not quite sure the regulations regarding use of the kitchens to prepare food. And even if it's not prepared, let's just say it's packaged sandwich. And in fact, if that's what it is, sandwiches would come in, you would bag them and then put them off into a container. So I don't know what the regulations are regarding that, but right now we do not have our own staff that will be available on Monday. Okay, so that it's not a question of even getting into schools. I think we can bypass that. It's a question of who would bag and can they bag. So I would have to find that out.
All right, thank you, Dr. Kerbal. Mr. Amico?
Mr. Mayor, can I just respond to that quickly?
Yep, please.
What I hope I was a little less clear than I should have been. What I'm talking about coming up for this upcoming Monday would be without the participation of food services or our cooks or Maureen staff. I understand their anxiety, and I'm not asking them to do anything more. Or I'm not trying to dismiss that level of fear that's real and exists. We can take care of volunteers. If you want to go through a process of seeing if that's possible, I know I can get the people to get this done. I think what's happened in the last couple of weeks is that pre-prepared sandwiches, both breakfast and lunch sandwiches, are what Ms. Rose ordered, and as long as that continues, that makes it simpler because less hands touching things, the safer it is for everybody. I think it's a matter of putting those sandwiches, breakfast and lunch, into a brown paper bag, which is I think what they've been doing, and then having it available curbside for the pickup. And I can accomplish that. I'm not asking anyone to do more. We can, that's what I'm saying, as far as revisiting that during the school break or after the school break to see where the curve of the virus actually is.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Hockman. Thank you. That's terrific. Mr. Amico?
Thank you. Through the chair to, I'll start with Mr. Hockman. Thank you for your continued leadership on with your program. Thank you to Corey Jackson at Citizens Inn for all their work. Thank you to all our food personnel in the schools. And I just want to echo what the mayor had mentioned and Mr. Hockman had mentioned, that we have to continue this program. This has to somehow be continued. We're in a national state of emergency. We're in a Massachusetts state of emergency. These kids need to be fed. This may be their only, food during this time. And to me, that's a major public health issue. So, please keep us updated on this. If we have to contact the state and bring in whoever we have to help out, we have to do it. Children in this city of Peabody need to be fed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Amico. Yeah, this has made a difference, and we have made a commitment, all of us, to help those students and families who need it during this difficult time. So this will continue. We'll talk this through on Thursday. So appreciative to have so many community partners and so many volunteers that are helping make this happen. So we're going to continue that effort and work out the details on Thursday during our meeting. So I'll provide a further update at that time. And I'm sure this will be an ongoing part of our regular meeting. Mrs. Dunn, did you want to weigh in before we moved on?
Yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I was trying to find a memorandum that came through from MASC concerning school lunches and coordination with local community organizations, and I can't find it quick enough, but I will try to find that and get that to you prior to your meeting.
Great, thank you. Great. Anybody else? Go ahead.
No.
Dr.
I thought
Kerwin.
we're ready to move on. Little Tanner's
Yes.
tuition.
Yes,
Okay,
please.
There was a request by families to not charge families for the last several months. I think the memo, the letter should be in your packet. And I want to just have a discussion about that. I'm just looking at, should be in your packet. There it is. All right,
Yes, it's page 43 of our packet.
So it says, dear Little Tanner's families, our goal of Little Tanner's program is always to support families as best we can. At this time of uncertainty, we are available for any questions, support. Your child's educational needs and overall well-being is so important to us. I think then it goes on to talk about enrichment and everything else. The question of tuition has been brought to our attention. We want to inform you of our plan for our May 4th, 2020 return. March and April tuition will be waived. March tuition checks will be applied towards May tuition. If our return date changes, we will reevaluate this plan and notify families with updated information. Thank you. We look forward to seeing all of our Little Tanners soon. The Little Tanners Early Childhood Program that's at the high school. But this has to go before the school committee. Okay, before I think a decision can be made. So I'm trying to bring it before the members.
Hey, thank you, Dr. Kerbel. Mrs. Carpenter, you wanted to weigh in?
Sure. Through the chair, Dr. Kerbel, thank you for this. So are you looking for a motion that we approve, waiving their tuition fees and applying them to future dates? I mean, personally, I don't see why anybody would be paying for a service they're not receiving anyway, but what is it exactly that you need the motion for?
Yeah, just that. I think that would be great. If you could, make a motion to waive the tuition for those 2 months.
Yeah, so I'll make a motion to waive the Little Tanner's tuition for the month of March and April. Any tuition that has been collected can be applied to May, and then we'll revisit it should something change for the May 4th. But I see Mr. Scanlon saying something, so maybe he needs me to change my motion.
Just the last part, if you could just leave the apply to May part open, because it may need to spill into the next fiscal year. So just say apply it to future,
So when you say, so are you saying that if a parent paid tuition already, didn't receive their services, we're not going to refund them, we're going to apply it for the next year?
That's where that's the assumption I'm understanding, is that you pay ahead with tuition. You pay quarters ahead. So if payment is made that extends beyond June, and you say you can make a credit to May, but they've already made a payment for the last quarter. It would depend on the specific.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I don't
No, all I'm
think
saying
we
is
would keep it because we're done in June. We would have to refund them, correct?
Well, we could. I mean, so you're saying your thought is that it stays within the fiscal year, and that that we can't apply credit if we don't come back to school either way, then we have to do refunds. I get it.
I mean, I would personally think we do a refund because they wouldn't return until September if they're returning. I mean, I suppose they could apply it to their next monthly tuition or quarterly tuition if they're gonna come back, but we don't run a summer program for Little Tanners, do we?
No. And what you just said is what I was going to recommend, is just apply it to a future.
Unless
So
they're
we're on
not
two
coming
different
back.
topics now.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So I guess the motion would just be to waive the tuition for March and April, and then we'll deal with May when it comes.
Second,
Okay, you've heard the motion by Mrs. Carpenter, seconded by Mr. Olympio. On the motion, I did want to recognize Mrs. Chioda.
Thank you. I just had a question about our general education tuitions for the preschool at the McCarthy, which is also in the same situation.
If I can, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, please.
I mean, I would assume it would be the same situation if, they're not receiving services. I think we should handle all of the preschool tuitions in the same manner.
Okay, so that'd be part of your motion?
Are they receiving, I mean, they're not receiving any remote learnings. Are those preschool teachers providing any type of services? I mean, where do we stand on the preschool side of this?
The preschool teachers are all special education teachers and are providing remote learning opportunities for all of their students.
So the McCarthy is, so those preschool students at the McCarthy are receiving remote distance learning?
Yes, yes.
What does that look like?
It's certainly a very different process. It does not replicate what would be provided within a preschool classroom, but it's they're sending out information, they're sending out resources. They are, for instance, one of the teachers sent out a videotape. Part of their packet this week was a video of a teacher reading a story and presenting some literacy skills. So it's a variety of skills. They're holding their morning meetings, their centers. So they're still continuing to include all of the students that are able to participate and interested in participating in that process, whether they have disabilities or not.
So that's at the McCarthy. Now, what about Passos? We don't we don't have anything with that, right?
No, they're not ours.
So McCarthy, we're looking at the role model students for tuition refund, and then we're looking at Little Tanners for tuition refund. Are they receiving any services, the Little Tanners?
I'm not aware of Little Tanners receiving any services.
Okay. So, so I would hold my motion. I would move forward on my motion with Little Tanners because I think that's a different situation. The McCarthy, I don't really know enough about. I guess I would want to hear from, Mr. Olympio, are you receiving, does anybody have a child that goes there? I'm not sure where we're going with this one.
Yeah, no, I haven't heard anything, Ms. Carpenter.
I would just assume that they would get a refund as well. I think that's a little bit of a different situation for the preschoolers. I'm not so sure that I'll yield to committee.
Yeah,
members.
well, let's open it up. I'll go to Mr. Hockman, then Mrs. Dunn.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing this up. I actually have it a similar concept as an agenda item under new business in terms of refunds of transportation fees and athletic fees. Again, not getting services that people have already paid for. But I do have a question through the chair to Mr. Scanlon with regard to Little Tanners and the integrated preschool. Those are tuitions that we built into our budget that we're going to pay salaries. So we had offsets, or we had an expectation of bringing in some revenue. So and we're still paying. Very nice, Brandy.
Sure.
And we those salaries. Firstly, secondly, it's my understanding that at least with the Little Tanners, the first opportunity for placement for Little Tanners goes to staff members and city employees. So do we know if there are any children placed in Little Tanners that are not staff members' children or city employee children? Seems like everyone.
They are all city employees. All the children are children of employees.
I'm having a hard time hearing anything.
All the Little Tanners are members of employees. They're children of employees, all of them in the Little Tanners.
So all the Little Tanners are children of a staff member. Is that what I heard you say, Dr. Lord?
Yes.
So while I don't, philosophically, I agree with Ms. Carpenter, and I certainly agree with if you're not getting the service, you shouldn't have to pay for it. How does that impact our budget?
Well, it will impact the
No, Mr. Scanlon, go ahead.
Okay, it will impact the budget because there is the offset that is applied. So that means that the revenue is not coming in, but the expenditure is not being applied through the revolving fund. The expenditure is being applied through the general fund, like you're saying. So we're not able to offset costs from the general fund over, to the revolving fund. I would think it might have to we'd have to see what happens with the CARE Act and see if this is a qualified cost that we could then offset at a later time, to an additional grant, hopefully, that we would receive funding on a federal, packet. It's not a huge dollar amount. It's one of our smaller offsets.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. I don't think it's a huge budget impact, but I guess what I'm saying is that there's really no distinction for the staff members who are paying tuition for Little Tanners. They're still being compensated at the full rate, and we're just trying to compensate our Little Tanner employees at the full rate. So, I think there's a difference between this and transportation and athletics where, but I'll open it up again.
Thank you, Mr. Hockman. Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see what Mr. Hockman is speaking of with that distinction. I do see a big distinction. The Little Tanners program, we only have how many children in that program, Dr. Lord, do you know offhand how many are in there?
I'd say about 10. If you give me a minute, I can get the exact number for you.
Okay, that's okay, because I know it's a small number. The difference I see is the Little Tanners program it's daycare. It's a daycare program, and the educational component is for our high school students in the CTE program who are learning how to work with little children. Our preschool program is, I'm going to use the term educational. The children attending the preschool are in class. They learn, there is a curriculum. I see them as two very different programs. So I can understand a difference between the funding that goes into those two programs as far as people paying for daycare as opposed to people paying for education, buses, fees. I don't want to go down a slippery slope, but I do see a distinction between Little Tanners and any of the other fees that people pay in this district.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. We do have a motion on the floor for Mrs. Carpenter for reimbursement for the Little Tanners for March and April. To no further comment, we'll do a roll call vote.
Mr. Amico,
Yes.
Mr. Arnottis,
Yes.
Mrs. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Olympio,
Yes.
Mrs. Dunn,
Yes.
All right, well, why don't we hold any further discussion, because it is under new business. I think we can hold and take that up a little bit later in the meeting. Dr. Kerbal, any further items for your report?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to written communications. We do not have any today, so we will move on to subcommittee reports. I know it's been difficult to have meetings during this time, but let's quickly run through. Education Subcommittee, Mr. Hockman.
No report.
Okay. Finance Subcommittee, Mrs. Carpenter.
At this time, I think that the union has requested to meet with the negotiations team to discuss the high school schedule. So I will be reaching out to Joe Amico and John Olympio and the other members that are involved in that to schedule something.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
School safety, Mr. Olympio.
Nothing new to report.
Athletics and wellness, Mr. Hockman.
No report.
Quality and standards, Mrs. Dunn.
Nothing to report.
Parent and student advisory boards, Mrs. Dunn.
Nothing to report.
Okay. Building and grounds, Mr. Amico.
Nothing to report.
Special education parent advisory board, Mr. Olympio.
Nothing to report.
A city council and legislative delegation, Mr. Arnottis.
Nothing to report.
All right, thank you. Next item we'll go to is new business. First one is school choice vote. That was requested by me. I'd like to hold that to the next meeting and move on to a couple of other items that we've kind of been discussing during the course of this meeting, but let's tackle them one at a time just to see if there's any further discussion. We'll go to item number 2 under new business, school closure due to the COVID-19 outbreak. Mr. Hockman, turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you and your administration for your leadership in terms of closing the school buildings and keeping people safe. I think it's been an important message from you and well received and done extremely thoughtfully and well. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So I kind of alluded to some of this a little bit earlier in the meeting as far as, we now have a lot of staff members who are home who we've committed to paying, and I want to keep them safe, and I want to keep them out of the schools as directed by the mayor. But I just wanted to explore if there's an opportunity to get some things done that we've kind of alluded to over the course of several years, but haven't been able to accomplish, one of which is the digitizing of the special education records. I mean, I think that there's a possibility, or at least by putting together a plan to get this done. I don't know if it's practical. Like I said earlier, I kind of threw this out there without even talking to Ms. Chioda, and for that I apologize again. And I don't know if you have the ability to talk about it tonight or this afternoon, or if it's something we take offline and discuss at a different time. But that's just one of the thoughts. The other thought, or another thought I had, Mr. Mayor, we've talked about the redistricting, and I think this gives us a perfect opportunity to get at least a committee together and get some of the preliminary meetings or meeting out of the way through this platform or another platform, where we can get some of the fundamental concepts as to what that committee would look to achieve or hope to achieve during the course of doing that. So those are just some of the things that I was thinking about. Hopefully we have some cost saving measures with transportation, even though we're going to pay part of that contract. Hopefully there's some cost saving measures. Hopefully there's some cost saving measures with utilities. I'm hoping school buildings that aren't occupied now are down to 60 degrees or lower. I mean, I don't see any need to heat buildings that aren't occupied. And getting back to that digitizing, hopefully some of those savings allow us to buy some of the hardware that is going to be necessary for that if we can get that done. So that's really why I wanted this on the agenda.
Great. No, thank you for putting it on the agenda. And I like to keep actually those two items, the digitizing of the SPED records and redistricting, on for the next meeting. I think both of those we can gather some more information and see how that can work, and see if those are, at least the digitizing, see if that's a possibility, and the redistricting has to move forward as well. So let's put those on for the next meeting.
Fair enough.
Great, thank you. All right, we had a pretty good discussion earlier on this topic under new business item 3, educational objectives for the remainder of the 2019-2020 school year. I think everybody was weighing in. I wanted to open that back up for discussion if there's further comments to be made. Really difficult for all of us to know what the right thing to do is here. And I think we just need to continue to discuss this moving forward. So I'll open that up. Mr. Hockman, it can start with you. You brought this item forward. And then we can open it up for other members to weigh in.
Yeah, I expressed my opinions earlier. I see Ms. Dunn has her hand up and Mr. Amico wished to speak, so I'll yield.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Mrs. Dunn first and then Mr. Amico.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Hockman. One of the things that I held off bringing up when we were discussing this earlier, but it was something that was brought into the conversation, was about the Essex North Shore and their digital and distance learning. And what I'd like to point out to the members is every district is different with their capabilities and the status of the district. And one of the really amazing things, as you know, I am the Peabody representative on the school committee for Essex North Shore, and I am continually amazed and impressed with what they have at that school for the technological equipment, but also for the support. And honestly, that was why I was so excited when I saw Dr. Kerbel's presentation at our last meeting about the 21st Century Learning Department. Having that in place, to me, is going to move our district leaps and bounds ahead. I've already seen something like that in operation because I see it every month at Essex North Shore. For that school to be able to provide the distance learning that they are currently doing, it's being done very well, as people have noted, because it was basically a seamless transition. And don't get me wrong, there was a lot of work that had to be done to do it, but they had the structure, they had the equipment, they had everything in place to do this. Here in Peabody, we don't have that. And that was why I was so excited about the 21st Century Department, not even knowing what was coming down the pike, but being able to set up the distance learning for districts. You really and truly cannot compare. You can aspire. We can learn from other districts and take the best practices and be able to do it going forward. But we're coming out of a place that's very different than other spots. As it is now, we're still trying to get Chromebooks into our students' hands. We're still trying to get Chromebooks into our teachers' and staff hands, which is a real problem. We have a great center of technology at the Higgins. It's been integrated very well into that school, and we see it. And you can see it happening at the high school, and the elementary is very different. And that's absolutely because we don't have that structure in place right now. So I just wanted to point that out to everyone. And believe me, Essex North Shore, they're wonderful about wanting to help people. I know that they can give us some additional best practices. But to be perfectly honest, we were heading in that direction right now. It's just it isn't place. It isn't in place at the moment.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Mr. Amico?
Thank you. Through the chair to the committee. Not sure if anyone got this alert, but I just got an alert. 96 new deaths in Massachusetts, 1,365 new cases. It's going to be very difficult over the next 2 years on our kids, our staff. If I can reiterate what I said earlier, less is more. Let's not focus entirely on the academics. Let's make sure people are okay. Let's make sure kids are okay. This is going to be a very, very difficult 2 weeks. And as I said earlier, okay, how great your lesson is, what you put in front of kids, if they're not well, they're not learning. And if they're not learning, you know, we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. Let's take care of these kids. Advice to everyone else, we have incredible teachers. We have incredible principals. Let's let those people, the principals, the teachers, take care of the kids. They know the kids better than anybody. Okay, elementary teachers, they're called mom and dad by their kids all the time. Same thing with principals. Let's focus on the principals and teachers. They are our frontline people. They know the kids. Let them do their thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Amico. Anybody else like to weigh in on this? We'll keep this item on the agenda as well moving forward. And last item, new business, refund of fees paid by students and families. Mr. Hockman, I know we've also discussed that a bit, but I think it warranted some further
Kind
discussion.
of breaking up a little, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, sorry. I wanted to go to item number 4, new business.
Yeah.
Refund of fees paid by students and families. I know we just touched on this a bit earlier regarding the Little Tanners program, but I think it merits some further discussion. So I didn't know if you wanted to add or give any more reasoning behind this.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, these are, first, I would ask, I don't know if it's Dr. Lord or Dr. Kerbal, have spring sports tuitions been paid yet or athletic fees?
Chris, do you know? Chris?
I'd have to get back to you on that. I actually have a meeting with our finance group tomorrow, the next day. I don't have my calendar right in front of me. But the student activities account process for giving refunds for like the prom and a couple of other events, we started that process. I can have more details for you at the next meeting with respect to sports fees. They never had tryouts, so we never had it. Some people may have, but tryouts are the ones that actually define when the fee gets paid, and that never happened. I would suspect no, but I'll check to just to be sure.
Yeah, I don't think the fee gets paid till the teams are actually settled, and I don't know that occurred, but I'm not sure either. So if you can check, that would be fantastic. And then as far as bus fees, Mr. Mayor, you know, again, you know, to Ms. Carpenter's logic earlier, which is sound, if we're not receiving the service, what are people paying for? And, you know, and people can use the money right now. A lot of people are unemployed and out of work and uncertain with investments and during these times. So maybe through you to Mr. Scanlon, is there a mechanism for refunding on a pro rata basis unused transportation fees?
Oh, Mr. Scanlon, can you unmute?
I said there isn't one that exists currently, but it can be set up based on number of days. It's just nothing that we've discussed so far.
Yeah, thank you. Just to jump in on this, I think, Mr. Hockman, I think we all agree that that's something that, well, I actually don't want to speak for everybody, but I think that's something that has to be done. We need to reimburse those students and families for busing, the parking fee during that period of time. So whatever the number, we'll have to ascertain starting at the beginning of March and then reimburse. I think that's something that has to be done moving forward.
Yeah, so if we keep this on, maybe so that Dr. Lord and Mr. Scanlon can get us that information, and then we can take a vote on it at that point, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's the thing to do. So we'll put that on the agenda for the next meeting as well. So a couple things I wanted to say as we wrap up. Well, at first, is there anything else that we wanted to touch on? We okay? So,
Dr. Kerbal has his hand up.
oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Kerbal. Go ahead,
Yep.
please jump in.
No, are we going into executive session after your comments?
Yes.
Okay.
So, well, firstly, I just wanted to, this was new for us, our first school committee meeting done in this remote way. I wanted to thank Chris Mitchell and his team for his assistance in putting this together, as well as Dr. Kerbal, Dr. Lord, your team, making this happen. I wanted to thank PAT, the incredible Jim Palmer, for his work in making this work for us. I think overall, I didn't know what to expect, but I think overall things went pretty smoothly here. I dropped my phone a couple times, and I think a couple other, funny things happened. But overall, I thought we were able to cover a lot. 3-hour meeting, we covered a lot of important topics, and I know we're going to have a lot of meetings continuing these discussions. So I wanted to set up a meeting for April 21st. I think we need to get all this information together, and really dive into these topics more on the April 21st meeting, 2 weeks from today. We'll leave it at 3 p.m. for now, and I'm sure we'll be getting a lot of information that we can use for that meeting. We'll also be having a meeting on Thursday that we'll get a report out to regarding food service. As we discussed, that's something that has to continue, and we'll work out some way for that to happen. But in terms of these important school topics, let's again meet on April 21st, Tuesday, April 21st at 3 p.m. If something happens of an emergency basis or something needs to be addressed right away, we can take it up at an earlier time and do the proper notice. One good piece of news I wanted to report is that Dr. Josh Vidala, our incoming superintendent, and I have worked out an agreement. Right now, it's just a verbal agreement regarding the terms of his contract. So I wanted to put that on for our April 21st meeting and bring that forward to the school committee for that vote. But we do have a verbal agreement in place to bring him on board starting July 1st, which I'm pleased about. So I'll bring that forward to you, and we'll have that on the agenda for the April 21st meeting. So there's nothing further. I entertain a motion to go into executive session.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make that motion, but just a quick question before, and are we going to do that on the same room or platform, or is there a separate place where we're not?
This is going to happen on the Google Meet link that went out as well. On the Google Meet will be private.
All right, so I'll make the motion to go into executive session with the intent not to come back to public session. And I would ask if we can have a 10-minute recess in between.
Yes. You've heard the motion. You've heard the motion by Mr. Hockman, seconded by Mr. Arnottis. All in favor of that motion. Again, thank you to all of you for being a part of this. This was a long meeting, but again, very important information and items we were discussing, very important topics. So we will now take a break, go into executive session. Again, our next meeting will be April 21st at 3 p.m. And we will get notice out as we're required to and let people know. So thank you again, everyone. 10-minute break.
Yep, just a heads up, everybody, I'm the last one. I have to log out last, so make sure you all close down your computers now from Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lord.